It's the true-life crime story that took Hollywood by storm. Donnie Brasco is the tale of how an FBI agent spends 6 years undercover in one of New York's most ruthless mafia crime families. But enthralling though it is, the film doesn't tell the half of it.
One mistake, one wrong move, and you're whacked.
The real Donnie Brasco penetrated organized crime far deeper than the movie is able to show. It barely touches on the crippling blow the undercover operation dealt to the mob.
235 members of the mafia were convicted as a result of what he did.
This is the real story of the greatest undercover agent in FBI history, told by the real Donnie Brasco, Special Agent Joseph D. Pistone.
The reality is, it's every day thinking, am I going to get whacked or killed today?
In 1997, the Oscar-nominated movie Donnie Brasco hits the big screen. It stars Johnny Depp as an undercover FBI agent and Al Pacino as a mafia gangster. Consulting on set was none other than the real-life Donnie Brasco, Special Agent Joseph D. Pistone.
When I first was approached about the movie, it was like, who wants to make a movie about me, you know? And then when it became a reality, it was like, wow, you know, they're really going to make a movie about my case.
But successful though the film was, it actually underplays the enormous impact that the real Donnie Brasco had on the mob. Just one extraordinary thing that the movie doesn't reveal is that the whole operation came about almost entirely by accident. In the 1970s, New York is in the grip of a crime wave, with entire industries controlled by the mafia. Violent truck hijackings are on the up. But no one is sure who is behind them.
Back in those days, a trailer load might be worth $5, $6, $10 million, depending on what the commodity was.
The FBI decide to send someone undercover to investigate the truck hijackings. They select Special Agent Joe Pistone. He has the perfect background for this sort of work.
I grew up in an Italian neighborhood, and, you know, I knew thieves, I knew gangsters growing up. You know, as we say, I was street smart, and my supervisors in the FBI recognized this.
To infiltrate the hijackers, Pistone needs to be credible as a criminal. But as an FBI agent, he is not allowed to commit crimes. So they give him a low-risk cover, a jewel thief.
In the undercover world, as far as the government's concerned, you can't get involved in crimes of violence, and being a jewel thief wasn't a violent profession.
To ensure he can pull it off, Pistone undertakes weeks of specialist training.
You have to know all aspects of your profession. I need to know diamonds, I need to know precious gems, I need to know how to pick locks, I need to know alarms. Finally,
he adopts a new name. Joe Pistone becomes Donnie Brasco. In September 1976, Special Agent Pistone effectively ceases to exist. Donnie Brasco sets off to infiltrate New York's criminal underworld, putting his entire family life on hold for the sake of the agency. He has no idea that he won't return for 6 years. Donnie Brasco starts hanging out in places used by suspected truck hijackers.
And the idea was for me to frequent these establishments, get known, and hopefully get into conversation with individuals.
At first, Donnie takes it slowly.
You can't approach them and say, hey, you know, I'm Donnie Brasco, I'm a jewel thief. You have to hopefully get into a conversation with somebody that's associated with them and cultivate that individual, and then hope that leads you to the individual that you're targeting.
After several months, Donnie tests the waters with a bartender he has seen making deals. He tells him he has some merchandise to sell. The bartender says he might know someone who could be interested.
I just hand him an envelope and say, hey, I need X amount of money for this envelope. He doesn't ask me what's in it, takes it.
A few days later, the bartender comes back with a wad of money. This is Donnie's first break into the criminal underworld. The bartender turns out to have a wide range of criminal connections.
So now he knows that I'm a jewel thief. He starts to introduce me around as Donnie the jeweler.
And one of these introductions pushes the operation to another level entirely. "4 months since going undercover, Donnie reports some major progress to his case officer. He has made contact with someone suspected of organizing truck hijackings, a man known as Gilly.
Gilly Greco ran a crew that were hijackers and just general thieves.
But the real breakthrough is who Gilly Greco works for. He is what criminals refer to as a made man.
If you hear the term, he's a made man, he's a straightened out guy, he's a wise guy, he's a friend of ours, these are made members of the mafia.
A minor truck hijacking operation suddenly becomes a case against the biggest criminal organization in America. Back at New York's FBI offices, Donnie's connection to Gilly is big news. The American Mafia is at the height of its powers, allegedly worth over $10 billion a year. It claims to be bigger than General Motors, Chrysler, and US Steel combined. Gilly is a member of the Colombo family, one of the 5 mafia families which run New York.
It was a big game changer. Suddenly the FBI thought we can actually penetrate one of the mafia family.
Donnie is asked to drop the truck hijackers and to infiltrate the Colombo family. To do that, he must become close to Gilly, what the mob call an associate.
Each made member will have an associate that he's responsible for.
These were non-inducted members. They were wannabes.
An associate is the very lowest rung on the mafia ladder, but it is where Donnie's mission must start. The way to progress is to become indispensable by making money. Donnie starts delivering a steady flow of stolen goods from supposed burglaries.
Becoming an earner was the quickest way of advancing in the mafia. You had to produce.
But as an undercover agent, Donnie cannot commit any robberies himself.
In reality, they were given to me by the government, you know, that was confiscated stuff.
In no time at all, Donnie the jewel thief is proving himself to Jilly.
Maybe every other week I'd bring in some diamonds or precious gems or a couple boxes of watches or whatever.
But then Donnie becomes a victim of his own success. Two other Colombo mobsters, Patsy and Frankie, ask Donnie to come out on robberies with them.
They think, let's work together, but of course, Donnie's an FBI agent. He can't go out stealing things.
Donnie makes his excuses, but those excuses raise suspicions.
So one day Jilly says to me, he says, hey, you know, Patsy's kind of ticked off, and he wants to have a talk about it.
The undercover agent is summoned to a back room. The mobsters lock the door, and Donnie faces his accusers. Jilly Greca acts as mediator. Patsy and Frankie don't believe Donnie's a jewel thief at all. Patsy kicks off the interrogation.
He starts questioning me, you know, well, you say you did stuff in Miami, you did stuff here. Give me the name of guys that you did stuff with.
It soon becomes clear that Donnie is in serious trouble.
Patsy puts a gun on the table and said, Donnie, if you don't convince me you're so good, like Jilly says, you're only going out of this room rolled up in that rug.
With no solid cover story, Donnie has to rely on his FBI interrogation training.
What you try to do is you try to turn it around. I tell him, look, you just got out of jail. How do I know you didn't become an informant? That's why you're out of jail now. You know, I'm not giving you the name of anyone.
But Patsy and Frankie don't buy his story. They start to suspect he might even be an undercover cop.
You know, there's no way out. You're not getting out of there by running. You're getting out of there either being carried out in the rug or by walking out having defeated them.
After 5 hours of arguing, mobster Jilly has heard enough. Donnie hasn't crumbled under the pressure and has stood his ground. Jilly says he believes Donnie.
Jilly said, this is over.
As members of his crew, Patsy and Frankie must respect Jilly's decision. But Donnie still can't drop his guard.
With these individuals, you can't just go up and say, hey, you know, let's shake hands, because that's a sign of weakness.
Now his knowledge of the streets really kicks in. To act as a true gangster, Donnie must get payback for the insult of the past 5 hours. So he does something he thinks no FBI agent would ever do.
The only thing they understand here is some kind of physical force.
Donnie checks out his two accusers. One, Patsy, is what the Mafia call a made guy, a fully fledged member of the mob.
The rules is you can't lay your hands on a made guy in a confrontation. I can't do anything to Patsy because he's a made guy.
But the other, Frankie, is just an associate, the same mob rank as Donnie. That makes Frankie the only legitimate target for Donnie to lash out against. He must save face. So Donnie hits Frankie.
Patsy's punching me, and he punches me, and I punch Frankie. Because Frankie's not a made guy, so it doesn't make any difference to me.
Jilly eventually breaks up the fight. He is completely taken in by Donnie's performance, totally convinced that no cop would ever act like that.
It showed how tough he was, but at the same time, he knew the rules. And that saved his life.
Gilly now introduces Donnie to a gangster who will help the agent take his investigation to the next level. Another so-called made man, Tony Mira. What intrigues Donnie is that Mira is not a member of the Colombo family. He is from a different mafia family altogether, the Bonanos. This is news to the FBI. They had always thought that the different New York families, like the Bonanos and Colombos, were enemies.
They thought each of these families was an actual rival and they were fighting each other.
But it is clear that Gilly and Mira share business interests. Donnie suspects that there could in fact be extensive collaboration between different mafia families. To find out more, Donnie offers his services to Mira. Yet within a few months, it dawns on Donnie that Mira is a dangerous man to know. Even by the standards of the mafia, Tony Mira is a raging lunatic.
Mira was known as a knife man. If he gets into an argument with you, you'll be stabbed. He could erupt at any minute.
He was probably the meanest guy I ever dealt with in the mafia. But he was cuckoo, he was crazy. I mean, he'd fly off the handle in a second.
Terrified Mira could one day turn on him, Donnie needs an out. He focuses on one of Mira's connections, another Bonano mobster, Lefty Ruggiero.
You know, they called him Lefty because he was left-handed. He got the nickname Two Guns because I'm told when he went out on a hit, he liked to take two guns.
Though a hardened killer, compared to Tony Mira, Lefty Two Guns is at least sane.
And that's when I start really hanging with Lefty. And you just hang out all day, talk about, you know, scams, schemes, how to make money. And that's basically what the day consists of, you know.
Switching allegiances from the psychopathic Mira to Lefty is potentially a dangerous game to play. But then Donnie gets a break. In late 1977, Tony Mira is sent to prison for 8.5 years on a narcotics conviction.
When Tony Mira was sent to prison, it was a real relief for me because the guy was hard to deal with. I was hoping he never got out.
Now Donnie is a free agent. With Mira out of the way, Lefty does something remarkable. He lays a claim on Donnie.
Once you have a claim, you now belong to this soldier. You know, the same way the soldier belongs to his capo, you belong to him. So this is a chain of command.
Now I officially belong to the Bonano family.
By now, Donnie's operation is causing a stir back at New York's FBI offices. They are intrigued about the collaboration between different mafia families. Jules Bonavolonte, chief of the New York City FBI Organized Crime Division, takes personal charge of the case.
Bonavolente was a no-nonsense guy. He'd been a second lieutenant in Vietnam and had all the qualities of a brilliant supervisor.
Bonavolonte focuses on Donnie's insight that different mafia families actively work together.
Jules always saw the big picture, how controlling the 5 families were, their relationship with the other families throughout the country, that it wasn't just a localized operation.
He now asks Donnie to find out just how extensive these links might be. Do they even go right across the country?
But his vision was, if we can get into these other families, we should do it.
Donnie is told to embed himself even deeper in the mafia. Bonavolonte's new focus means that what began as a 6-month operation is now extended indefinitely. Donnie's next step is to get close to Bonanno Mafia family mobster, Lefty Two Guns Ruggiero.
Lefty, you might say, was the Bonanno gossip. He talked about everything. Apparently he had the loosest tongue in the family.
Lefty liked to say he was schooling me, and he really was, more than he knew.
He told him the ways of the mafia. Now you're telling an FBI agent this, so this is gold dust.
He tells Donnie that if he can become a fully fledged member of the mafia like himself, he can get away with anything.
And he looked at me, he said, you can lie, you can steal, you can cheat, you can kill, and it's all legitimate. So in their minds, it's legitimate to do these things because you're a member of the mafia.
Even better, Lefty reveals to the FBI the names of senior figures in other mafia families across the United States.
He was telling me who the different individuals were in the family, their positions.
This was a bonanza of intelligence that the FBI never would have gotten in the old-fashioned way from an occasional defector or an occasional bug that might give them some information.
But Donnie hasn't got enough to reveal the extent of different mafia families' collaborations across the United States. So Bonavolonte hatches a plan. He tells Donnie about an FBI operation targeting the Florida mafia family, the Trafficantes. The FBI has a nightclub called the King's Court wired up with hidden cameras and microphones. Could Donnie get one of the Bonanno Mafia family down there to meet the Trafficantes? But high-level contacts between mafia families are rare. This is not a meeting that Donnie or even Lefty can set up. The only way is for Donnie to target someone higher in the organization. He focuses on a rising star called Sonny Black Napolitano.
Sonny Black's reputation was a very tough individual, very smart, very cunning, and he was just a very respected mafia guy by everybody within the Bonanno family and the other families.
Sonny Black Napolitano was a cut above the ordinary mafioso. He was a born leader.
Sonny Black is what the mafia call a capo, a high-ranking made member who heads a crew of soldiers, now including Donnie and Lefty.
So it was very prestigious for Lefty and me to get placed under Sonny Black.
Through Lefty, Donnie lets it be known to Sonny that he has a link with a Florida club. This, he suggests, would be the perfect opportunity for the New York gangsters to extend their gambling operations to Florida.
You have to make it attractive in that it's going to make us money. It would be prestigious for him, so that's what I'm selling him.
Sonny loves the idea, but first he needs to get the okay from the Florida mob.
The important thing is when one mob is moving out of its home territory and trying to do business with another mob, you've really got to pay respect to them.
It's such a critical meeting that Sonny flies to Florida in person to meet with the Florida Mafia boss, Santo Trafficante, to get official permission for the New York gangsters to operate in Trafficante's territory.
Trafficante had to give approval, or at least be consulted.
And just as hoped, Trafficante agrees. Unbeknown to them, the whole thing is being captured by an FBI surveillance team. These are the actual photographs they took of that meeting. Sonny Black wastes no time and hosts an extravagant gambling night at the King's Court Club. It's a chance to put on a show and impress Trafficante.
We planned to have a big Las Vegas night, and Sonny had sent down roulette wheels. Trafficante had sent us 2 gambling sharks from Miami that were his guys. So we had the whole club set up for this casino night.
A local county cop is paid to turn a blind eye to the illegal gambling. For Donnie, it's an opportunity to shine. For the FBI, it's the moment to hit record and gather proof of illicit business deals between the 2 crime families. Everything is going well. Cash is flowing in and the gangsters are clearly impressed. But then,
there's a knock on the door, and one of the doormen opens the door and sees a bunch of sheriff's deputies out there.
And they burst in. They shut the whole party down.
it turns out that the bribed cop had let them down. For the FBI, it's a setback. For Donnie, it's a personal disaster. But worse, for top mobster Sonny Black, it's total humiliation.
Sonny was mad. He was mad getting arrested, but he was more infuriated with the embarrassment to Trafficante.
Sonny and his crew fly back to New York. Their mood is dark.
Now we had to patch things up with Trafficante, and we didn't know if we ever could. I mean, it was a big setback.
Back in New York, the news goes from bad to worse. Tony Mirror, the psychopathic mobster who introduced Donnie to his mentor, Lefty, is released from jail early. He believes Donnie belongs to him.
And now is when the jealousy and envy comes out. He thinks that I'm making millions of dollars and that he should be getting some of it.
Mirror meets with Sonny to demand Donnie back. And if he doesn't get him, there'll be hell to pay. Sonny refuses to hand Donnie over. Mirror is so incensed, he contacts senior members of the Bonanno family, accusing Donnie of breaking mafia law.
He says that I stole $250,000 from the family.
It's a trumped-up charge. But if the family believe Mirror, Donnie is a dead man.
To steal from the mafia is a cardinal sin, and as soon as the mafia hear of that, you will be killed.
A sit-down is called, the mob's equivalent of a trial. The judge and jury are senior members of the Bonanno family. As a mere associate, Donnie is not even allowed in the room. He must rely on his capo, Sonny Black, to represent him.
Now I'm kind of concerned because, and if Sonny loses the sit-down, they're going to kill me.
The sit-down opens with Mirror presenting his case. Donnie has stolen from the family and deserves to die. Donnie waits at home nervously.
You just have to wait out. If it's good, then they come and tell you. If it's bad, then it's bad.
During breaks in the sit-down, Lefty calls Donnie and updates him. These are the actual recordings. They show just how great the danger Donnie is in.
There's a swindling bastard.
That's right, he is.
He wants you bad.
Well, when's this thing all gonna end with this
It
guy?
ain't gonna end. Forget about it. No, you're not so. A lot of trouble.
The only good news is that Sonny Black is still backing him.
Well, how does Sonny stand tonight with us?
Where's he stand? He's not giving you up. Not giving you up. And don't forget, he said the extra 3 hours, over you.
After almost 4 weeks, the final verdict comes in. Thanks to Sonny Black, Donnie is in the clear.
Sonny's got on a limb for me. To defend me is a big deal because he's going against other captains and he's saying that he vouches for me 100%.
This extraordinary moment is never mentioned in the film, but proves to be a big turning point in the relationship between Sonny and Donnie. Sonny now considers Donnie a close friend. The two men start regularly socializing together, even hanging out at Sonny's Brooklyn apartment.
Sonny Black took him under his wing. He had this very one-on-one relationship, and he really confided. And he had conversations with him which weren't just about mob talk, but about life in general.
Here's one of the most powerful guys in the Bonanno crime family. And we're sitting at his kitchen table in our underwear and t-shirts, BSing about mafia business.
Sonny Black is not like any other gangster Donnie has met. For a start, he has an unusual hobby, pigeon racing.
They love those pigeons. It's like, this isn't what you see on television,
But Donnie has to remember that this man is still a vicious criminal and killer.
Despite the close relationship, it still wasn't a life insurance policy. One mistake, one wrong move, and you're whacked.
Sonny calls Donnie to a private meeting. The undercover agent has no idea what could happen. One thing that is completely unexpected is what Sonny is about to ask him.
Sonny told me that the books were gonna open up in December, and what that means is that the Mafia was gonna induct members. I would become a main member, get inducted into the Bonanno crime family.
For an FBI agent to be given the offer of becoming made is completely unprecedented.
That made me feel great because now he really believes in me as a gangster.
But Sonny's offer comes with a condition. The family are having trouble with another Bonanno mobster called Bruno Indelicato. Sonny wants Donnie to take care of him.
Sonny Black gives me a gun and says, I'm giving you the contract to kill him.
How Donnie reacts to this request is critical.
I said, all right, because you can't refuse. I can't say no. Because if you refuse a contract, then you get killed.
But as an FBI agent, Donnie clearly can't commit a crime. He puts in an urgent call to his boss, Jules Bonavolonte.
I called Jules. I tell him, I said, Jules, I just got the contract to kill Bruno.
Bonavolonte calls an emergency face-to-face meeting.
He decided this was far enough. It was getting too dangerous.
But Donnie is desperate to keep the operation alive.
Can you imagine the publicity for us that they were dumb enough to have a guy 6 years and then induct him into the mafia?
He comes up with a plan. He won't actually kill Bruno Indelicato. He will just make it look like he whacked him. But his boss doesn't buy it. It's just too dangerous. They should quit while they're ahead.
So now Jules says, no, you can talk from now until the cows come home, but you ain't convincing me. It's over. It's over.
It would have been on Jules' conscience if anything had happened to Pistone.
Operation Donnie Brasco is pulled. Special Agent Joe Pistone is sent into hiding, and the FBI roll up the operation. It's time for the agency to reveal their hand. On July 28, 1981, FBI agents pay a visit to Sonny Black's Brooklyn bar. They reveal that Donnie Brasco, the man Sonny intended to induct into the mafia, is in fact an undercover FBI agent.
At first, when the FBI agents tell him, he just doesn't believe it.
He could not accept that he had been dealing for years with an FBI undercover agent, that Donnie Brasco was a plant.
Slowly, the reality dawns on Sonny. He has committed the worst possible crime in mob law. He has welcomed the enemy into the heart of his family. There can only be one sentence for this transgression: death. The FBI offer Sonny a way out. Become an informant and help them snare the very top rungs of the mafia. They give him time to think it over. Sonny goes up to his roof. These are the real surveillance pictures of that moment.
And you can see on his face that he knew he was in trouble. He knew he probably wasn't going to make it.
It must have really ripped him apart that he had put so much trust into Donnie Brasco. It actually treated him almost like a brother, that he had really knew that he had committed the most hateful sin and error possible.
The FBI maintains surveillance on Sonny's apartment, awaiting his next move. But then he vanishes. The only sign that Sonny may still be alive is when his girlfriend contacts Donnie.
Sonny said to her, I want you to get in touch with Donnie and tell him that I loved him and that he was better than us. And he never made us do anything that we wouldn't do anyway. I mean, here's a guy that knew he was gonna die. He wasn't laying the blame on me. So yeah, that gave me a lot of respect for Sonny as a man.
Later, an informant reveals Sonny Black's fate. 2 weeks after he learns Donnie's real identity, he is summoned to a sit-down.
Sonny Black did go out like a real pro. Before he left for the final meeting, he knew the death warrant had been signed.
Before setting out, Sonny puts his affairs in order.
Gives the bartender his keys, his money, and this diamond ring, and says, I'm going to a sit-down, and I probably won't be coming back. I mean, that's a gangster.
First bullet winged him. He wasn't dead. He said, hit me again and make it good. A real classy line.
Sonny's corpse washes up off Staten Island. His hands have been cut off.
It was a signal. Anybody in the Mafia knew what that meant. It meant he had betrayed the Mafia. He had shaken hands with an FBI agent. And this was it could be no more worse sin.
Thanks to Donnie Brasco's undercover work, dozens of mobsters are immediately arrested, including Lefty Ruggiero. Tony Mirror is less lucky. He is shot dead by his own cousin. As for Special Agent Joseph D. Pistone, he spends the next 6 years in court testifying against the American Mafia. But his undercover work devastated more than just the New York Bonanno family. His testimonies helped bring down the mob right across the United States and abroad.
It came as a real shock, and the ramifications for the Mafia were tremendous. 235 members of the Mafia were convicted as a result of what he did.
What we did was convict the upper echelon, not just the soldiers. We brought it to the point where now it's just another organized crime group in the United States. It doesn't control the country like it did.
No one has ever done the damage in one fell swoop to the Mafia that Joe Pistone did.
His reward from the FBI is just $500. But the Mafia also has a reward in mind.
They put a $500,000 contract out on me, murder contract. And although they don't usually go after law enforcement, the reason that they put the contract out on me was they thought that I had crossed the line, and being that I had broken bread with them, I became their friend.
To this day, the bounty still stands. FBI agent Joe Pistone lives under a secret identity.
It was just my job, that's the truth. Use one of their phrases, it's strictly business. They had choice to be gangsters, I chose to be an FBI agent, strictly business.
The hit film Goodfellas is Martin Scorsese's mafia masterpiece. Ray Liotta plays gangster Henry Hill. In his rise from small-time bagman to mastermind behind the heist of the century. But success brings danger. And in a desperate attempt to save his own skin, he turns witness against the New York mob.
Henry was the most significant organized crime figure. He was going to be an invaluable witness.
The film ends as Hill's family, safe at last, start a new life in witness protection. But in reality, Henry's problems are only just beginning. Marshals from the Witness Protection Program deliver the news he fears the most. The mob are closing in. His testimony put one of New York's most vicious mobsters behind bars. And now he wants retribution.
No matter how long it would take, Henry was sure that they would hunt him down and kill him. And it was just a matter of time.
Henry was unbelievably desperate.
This is the real story of Henry Hill, a man on a mission to self-destruct.
He just couldn't control himself.
The seeds of Henry Hill's demise were planted long before he became a good fella.
Hey, give me some ice, kid, will you?
Henry Hill first comes into contact with the mafia as an adolescent when he takes a job at a mob joint. Top man is Paul Vario, a capo in the Lucchese crime family, one of the most violent mobs in New York.
He wasn't born a criminal, but he happened to have been reared in a neighborhood infested with mafia gangsters.
Ed McDonald is the former head of the organized crime strike force in Brooklyn. He will get Henry into the witness protection program.
He was attracted to the excitement and to the power and to the glamour of what he saw in front of him, to be a movie star with muscle. And that's really what he wanted, that plus the excitement of being a gangster.
At home, Henry's father struggles to provide for his wife and 7 children. Paul Vario, known as Paulie, will become the father he felt he never had. Henry is half Sicilian, so Paulie naturally trusts the boy and starts giving him more responsibility. But it's while waiting card games that Paulie introduces him to the man that will shape his future criminal career. Jimmy the Gent Burke. Henry Hill is immediately drawn to the charismatic mobster.
He loved the fact that Jimmy Burke would be respected wherever he went, into a restaurant, into a nightclub. Cheers would pull out immediately.
So Jimmy the Gent had a huge impact on Henry Hill. He would hand out $20 bills, and that's what Henry Hill really wanted. He aspired to that kind of richness, that kind of luxury.
But behind the extravagant facade, Jimmy is a ruthless gangster.
He's someone who demands respect. You don't mess with Jimmy the Gent.
As his stock rises, Hill starts to run errands with Capo Paulie. The teenager sees it as a privilege, but Henry is about to discover the cold facts of mob life. When Paulie drops in on his mistress, Henry thinks it's a routine visit. But the lovesick woman had made the cardinal mistake of contacting Paulie's wife. She had let slip about their affair.
Paulie then, with Henry there, went to her house and beat her savagely with a baseball bat.
And he put her in a hospital, broken neck, broken bones, and this was a woman, mind you.
It's a shocking lesson for Henry. The mob can forgive anyone but a rat.
Woman, child, or otherwise, if you do break that code of silence, the consequences can be quite severe.
It's a lesson Henry will remember for the rest of his life. By the early 60s, cargo worth $30 billion a year was passing through the newly built JFK airport. The mob quickly catches on to the criminal opportunity, and soon Jimmy Burke is the king of the cargo hijackers.
At Kennedy Airport, you could find anything from fur coats, jewelry, expensive watches, anything else that one could possibly imagine. These are cargo containers that at times contained hundreds of thousands of dollars in merchandise. And this was the reason why Kennedy Airport was the hotbed, the nucleus for hijackers.
When Henry gets a taste of the hijacking racket, his eyes are opened. For his first heist, he is partnered up with another young gun, a tough guy named Tommy DeSimone.
They were about the same age. They became friends, but they were two different elements. Tommy DeSimone was a loose cannon. He was a brute, 6'4", 240 pounds, and he could really handle himself. Henry Hill was peaceful, would avoid violence. Tommy DeSimone would embrace violence.
But for this heist, Tommy's violent nature will be kept in check as Henry sweet-talks his way through security. Once inside, he convinces a guard to open up the loading bay with the oldest trick in the book. 2 fingers in the back.
The idea that with 2 fingers you can convince a guard to open up the door for you. It establishes for him that the airports are good hunting grounds.
Henry's plan plays out seamlessly. The guard doesn't resist.
He did it without violence, without killing anyone, without hurting anyone, or without even risking being hurt himself. It was intoxicating to him. Addictive as well, naturally.
With the guard tied up, they leave the truck yard with trailers full of merchandise.
Within a matter of minutes, he had his hands on thousands of dollars in swag.
And for Hill, the important thing was that no one got hurt. With his new pal, Tommy, Henry's gang is complete. And with his share of the loot, $40,000 in today's money, Henry at last has the means to emulate his hero.
For Henry, having money wasn't a matter of building up abstract wealth. It was having enough money to go into clubs that he loved. He was always the center of attention.
But Henry knows that to be respected by the mafia, he needs a wife. A married man has more to lose, and when Henry is introduced to a young Karen Friedman, he initially sees her as a means to an end.
Henry meets Karen, and initially he didn't really like her that much, but was attracted to her over time because she's a say-it-like-it-is New Yorker. But she also was very innocent, and Karen really didn't know what she was getting involved with at the end of the day.
He finally gets Karen to come on a date with him to the Copacabana, and Sammy Davis Jr. is performing, and he sends over champagne. At that point, she realizes that this is someone who has potential.
Within months, the couple marry and move to the leafy suburbs of Long Island. But Karen will soon learn that Henry's heart lies with the mob.
I think Henry's biggest problem, from a personality standpoint, was that he had an addictive personality. And part of that addiction was that being addicted to the glitz, the glamour, and the excitement of being in the mob.
For now, Henry is where he wants to be. But Karen is desperate for her husband to go straight.
Karen has been trying to convince Henry to pull away from the mob, really striving to have a normal life here.
Even with the financial success, Karen really wanted a stable life for her kids.
But the pull of mob life in the city is too strong for Henry to take her seriously.
He was an excitement junkie. He was somebody who wanted to be on the edge all the time. He was addicted to the thrill and to the excitement of the mafia.
It wouldn't be long before Henry returns to the scene of his first big score, the Lucchese crime family's playground, JFK Airport.
The cargo buildings had no security whatsoever. The foreign airlines were very, very lax. Maybe they felt that being in the United States, crime was non-existent. Well, they were wrong.
Hill gets a tip-off that almost $500,000 in cash is being stored at the Air France depot. The money is being held behind one locked door. All Henry needs to open it is a key. While others might turn to violence to get it, Henry devises a pain-free plan. He gets the key holder drunk, and then organizes a distraction.
After the guard and the prostitute left the room, they frolicked for approximately maybe an hour and a half. Henry Hill went back into the room and removed the key to the vault from the key ring attached to the guard's pants.
Henry duplicates the key and returns it, and the guard is none the wiser.
Henry comes up with a plan that is wonderfully gentlemanly, and it's a beautifully elegant plan.
They walk into the Air France depot and unlock the door to the safe room. They locate the packets of cash, stuff as many as they can into a suitcase, and walk out. Henry left with $480,000 in cash, around $6.5 million in today's money. Without using violence, Henry was earning a reputation as a man who could help the mob get rich.
So when this happened, it really allowed Henry to move up the ladder in the mob, knowing that he finally gained the respect of people that he himself has respected all his life.
But just as Henry seems on the verge of the big time, the violence-averse Goodfella gets cold feet. Karen convinces Henry to go straight. And so with Paulie's blessing, he buys a club in Queens called The Suite. Paulie even banned the Vario crew from visiting the club.
Henry was a natural restaurateur. He loved treating people well. I think Henry really felt that it was the right thing to do to try and establish a legitimate business, go straight.
But despite Paulie's ban, it isn't long before his old partners in crime, Jimmy and Tommy, visit his club. With a life outside the mob within their grasp, it's the last thing the Hills want to see. But the boys have plans for a new venture, and Henry is sucked back into their world.
Henry Hill is at a moment in organized crime when America becomes involved in drug culture. Part of partying, part of enjoying yourself is using cocaine. This is the drug of success.
This was something that was banned in the five families in New York City. They learned that the people who were facing lengthy jail sentences for narcotics trafficking were likely to cooperate.
The upside is dealing drugs would be lucrative, and Henry's new club is off the radar.
Henry was violating this edict in the Lucchese crime family. If Vario learned about that, then he would be killed. But because he was using their narcotics, he became extremely careless.
As ex-FBI agent Steve Carbone reveals, it's not long before he's addicted to the merchandise as much as the profits.
He was almost obsessed. He was on the way to disaster. And what happened is the drugs finally got him.
And Henry isn't the only one. Tommy DeSimone becomes overwhelmed by the stimulant. It was only a matter of time before someone triggered the hothead to violence. That man is Billy Batts, a high-ranking mobster just released from prison.
Tommy is absolutely whacked out on cocaine. He's just out of control.
Batts makes a joke at Tommy's expense. He erupts and bludgeons Batts to death with his pistol.
The actual killing of Billy Butts is an absolute explosion of violence. Henry is right in the middle of it, witnessing it, unable to stop it.
In that instant, Henry's world is turned upside down. Billy Batts is no ordinary mobster. Billy Batts is a made man. He's sworn his life to the Mafia, and for that, he receives complete protection. The penalty for killing a made man is death.
Billy Batts is in a state of hyper-protection, and even another made man can't kill a made man. Being that now the three of them are equally endangered by this, the only thing that Henry could do is help dispose of the body.
For better or worse, Henry now knows that his fate is tied to Jimmy the Gent and Tommy DeSimone.
Once they've carried out this killing together, he is now completely bound to organized crime. There's no way out for him at this point.
The murder will haunt them for the rest of their lives. But for now, they've covered their tracks. With the murder hanging over him, Henry Hill receives some good news. His friend, a bookmaker named Marty Krugman, has contacts at Kennedy Airport. There's about to be a large shipment of untraceable cash moving through the Lufthansa cargo terminal.
Henry knew, as soon as he heard about it, that there was a great opportunity here. Anytime Henry learned of an opportunity for a score, he would do one thing. He would immediately go to Jimmy Burke and tell Jimmy about it.
Henry is given the floor plans of the cargo terminal and valuable intel on the security.
They knew the outline. They knew sort of the geography of the cargo terminal. They knew where the money was being kept. They knew where the jewelry was being kept.
Jimmy assembles a crew of hardened armed robbers. But Henry isn't among them.
Jimmy would not allow him to go on the Lufthansa robbery because he couldn't trust him, because Henry was just not a reliable, violent gangster. Burke and DeSimone were people who had reputations for being killers. Henry was sort of a tag-along guy.
Under cover of darkness, the crew make their move. They beat up a guard at the entrance to the Lufthansa cargo terminal.
Wide open! Come on, move, move!
Whether it's the cocaine or whether it's the fact that they've already together committed a violent crime, it's the first crime where they really brutalize the Lufthansa employees.
Now, they apply mental torture.
The gunman took the driver's licenses from all the employees and told them that if they identified them, that they knew who they were and where they lived.
Head down!
It worked. The terrified men get them into the vault. Henry may not have been on the robbery, but his intelligence delivers.
It turned out it was the largest robbery in the history of the United States, over $5 million in cash, and probably well over $1 million in jewelry.
Henry helped secure the equivalent of $30 million in today's money, and was in line for a fortune.
Henry got much more excited afterwards when Jimmy told him we had so much we didn't know what to do with it.
I think Henry was proud that he really was, in a way, responsible for the largest robbery in the history of the United States.
Within 48 hours, the FBI assign over 100 agents to the case. Ed McDonald, former head of the organized crime strike force in Brooklyn, is put in joint charge.
Informants were going wild. And within days, everybody in law enforcement knew that the Burke crew was responsible for the robbery. The question is, how do you get proof? You have to move slowly. You have to gather evidence against them.
The FBI puts the Burke crew under intense surveillance.
We decided that we would try to get bugs in cars. And mostly what we got was horrible disco music and the heating in the car. At the end of the day, our electronic surveillance produced nothing.
They hold out little hope when they show a Lufthansa guard photographs of the Burke crew. It seems like a lost cause, as the robbers wore masks. But as unlikely as it is, within a matter of minutes, they get a breakthrough.
Tommy DeSimone was the individual guarding the captives.
Head down.
And he removed the ski mask momentarily just to cool his face. And the Lufthansa employees had a good look at him and were able to ultimately identify him.
The man, still terrified from the robbery, refuses to testify in court. But they know they're on the right track. Henry, Jimmy, and Tommy are sitting on $5 million in cash. But the FBI is breathing down their necks. The FBI gets another break when they discover the getaway van driven by gang member Stax Edwards. Joint team leader Steve Carbone remembers the moment it was found.
I was there that day. We found it, put it in the garage, and did a forensic on it. Edwards was supposed to get rid of it, burn it, crush it. He didn't.
Investigators track Edwards to his apartment. But Edwards won't be talking. Six bullets in his head and chest tell the FBI that Jimmy Burke's unraveling. And he has a brutally simple plan to silence the heist crew. He'll murder everyone involved.
Burke was beyond himself. He couldn't handle it because he thought any minute the walls were going to come tumbling down.
Next on Jimmy's hit list is Marty Krugman, the bookmaker who gave Henry the Lufthansa tip-off.
Marty Krugman was a potential weak link, and shortly after the robbery, Marty Krugman went missing.
The bloodbath continues against anyone involved, however slight.
There was a homicide of a fellow by the name of Richard Eaton, who was found strung up in a freezer. And he didn't even really have anything to do with it. Every time we reached out for a subject, pretty much he was dead.
They could very well have been people who would have cooperated if we leaned on them heavily enough. And unfortunately, they got to them before we did.
Henry is helpless to stop Jimmy. As the body count nears 13, it becomes clear that no one is safe. While Henry Hill is alive, he is just another weak link. Henry is in a corner. If the FBI doesn't get him, Jimmy will. And it's surely only a matter of time before the Mafia links him to the death of made man, Billy Batts. But some good news. Henry learns that his best friend, Tommy DeSimone, is about to become a made man. It seems if the Mafia knows about the killing of Billy Batts, they don't care much.
Jimmy Burke is extraordinarily proud. This is someone who has attained his position being under the wing of Jimmy the Gent. It's a very proud moment.
As a made man, Tommy will be untouchable, and Jimmy and Henry can breathe a little easier. But the promotion is a ploy. Instead of making his bones, Tommy is whacked. Paulie knows about the killing of Billy Batts.
Tommy DeSimone was somebody who was wild. In that world, with the rules that they follow, he sort of got what he deserved.
If the Mafia knows that Tommy killed Billy Batts, the chances are they know everything.
Although Tommy committed the murder, they helped dispose of the body. And basically, once Tommy's been killed, It will just be a matter of time before they're killed. As someone who's not a made man, he is completely subject to justice as Paulie sees it. He's in extraordinary danger.
With Henry's world spiraling out of control, he survives by trafficking narcotics. It's a desperate gamble, because under mafia law, the penalty for dealing drugs is death.
So every moment he feared someone, an executioner, approaching him, either at his doorstep or perhaps in the streets.
And it isn't long before his past catches up with him.
Henry thought that that was the end. He just braced for that final blow, thinking that the executioner had finally caught him.
But the shot doesn't come. The man is a cop.
He feels this wave of relief because at that moment he's not going to be shot.
Henry is arrested for narcotics trafficking by the Nassau County Police Department. Within 24 hours, arrangements are made to turn him over to the FBI. With so many dead leads, Henry's arrest is the break they've been waiting for.
Jimmy Burke and that crew knew if Henry wanted to, he could rat on all of them.
Facing 25 years to life for dealing drugs or dying with his family at the hands of the mafia, Henry tries to bargain.
They always think, I don't have to give everything up. I'll be able to give part of it up, and the guys will still like me. He was thinking about getting some other small-time guys for extortion, loan sharking, those types of crimes.
But Henry also knows the price of ratting out the mob. So the FBI agents lay down their ace card, a wiretap recording of Jimmy Burke. Jimmy wants Henry dead. And so does Paul Vario, for Hill's drug use.
Henry was unbelievably desperate. He was worried about his family, his kids, so there was no question. He knew as soon as he got out, he was dead. Burke or Vario would take care of him.
He knew that life was spiraling out of control. There was no way to turn. He hit a brick wall.
After weeks of mounting pressure, Hill finally cracks.
Parole officer called me and said, you know, he wants to speak to me. But once you've done that, it looks like you're looking for help. And that means you might be willing to give up something for that help.
With nowhere left to run, Henry reveals all.
It became apparent that he had a lifetime of crime with these guys, and he was able to make cases as a witness.
He was a font of information, he was very reliable, and he was going to be an invaluable witness.
They make him an offer that might just save his life. If he testifies against Jimmy Burke and Paul Vario, they'll put Henry and his family into witness protection.
Henry really had nowhere to turn. Everything was crashing down on him, and we were his salvation.
They enter the witness protection program. And the Hill family disappear from the records. From his safe house, Henry makes secret trips to New York under armed guard to rat out the entire Lucchese crime family.
He had to be guarded, 24/7. They knew that he was cooperating. The minute he left there, his life was in danger.
He was scared. I mean, he really was scared. I mean, he was in constant fear that we're going to retaliate. They were going to come look for him and kill him.
The FBI agents are astonished as Hill gives up a lifetime's worth of evidence.
We weren't sure what he was going to offer us, but we did know he knew this group better than anyone.
Hill's testimony gets his personal godfather, capo Paul Vario put behind bars for 10 years.
He was the father that Henry didn't feel he had, but I think he also realized that it was a matter of Paul or him.
After years of giving evidence, Henry testifies that his mentor, Jimmy Burke, killed Richie Eaton, the man whose body was found frozen in a refrigerator. Jimmy the Gent Burke is sentenced to life in prison.
He wrote Burke off, and unfortunately, Burke was the victim of Henry Hill's testimony.
He becomes the most infamous mob rat in history. His evidence helps put away 50 members of organized crime. And in the eyes of the mafia, every one carries a death sentence. The witness protection marshals relocate Hill far from the New York mob. The Hill family start a new life with new names in Omaha, Nebraska. This is where the film Goodfellas ends, with Henry free from the mob's clutches. But in the real story, Henry Hill's life was in more danger than it had ever been. The witness protection marshals call the family's home with bad news. Jimmy Burke knows Henry is hiding in the Midwest.
Paulie and Jimmy were dedicated to finding Henry Hill. No matter how long it would take, Henry was sure that they would hunt him down and kill him. And it was just a matter of time.
The marshals aren't taking any chances. The Hill family is forced to build a new life again in another part of the country. A new beginning with a new identity should see life improve for the Hill family. But after years addicted to drugs, money, and adrenaline, Henry starts to unravel.
Henry had a great deal of difficulty adapting to life. He still wanted to be part of the old life. He backslided and he began to drink heavily. He began to use drugs.
So Henry was guilt-ridden and full of remorse. He loathed himself for having snitched on his friends. And in my opinion, ultimately, he wanted to end his life.
He can't resist telling everyone that he is Henry Hill, the mastermind behind the mafia's biggest heist.
Maybe because he was getting addicted to drugs and his brain was just fogged out. You know, he would shoot his mouth off about who he was.
He would get a couple of drinks in him, and yeah, you hear that story about Lufthansa, you know, that's me.
If he thought about it, he would keep his mouth shut, but he just wanted the attention.
As Steve Carbone discovers, Hill had given up on his family.
He called me once. He said, you know, you got to congratulate me. So I said, Henry, what for? He says, I got married. I said, oh, congratulations. And then I thought for a second, I said, Henry, you are married. I know, but that was with my other name. Now I'm in the program. He got married under his new name.
Inevitably, his wife leaves him. And it's not long before the witness protection marshals cut him adrift.
The witness protection program finally said, look, we're not going to have any more of this. So they kicked him out of the program.
Off the rails and with no one looking out for him, Henry falls in with a gang of drug traffickers.
Why would Henry do this kind of stuff? Why was Henry trafficking in narcotics? He was an excitement junkie. He was somebody who wanted to be on the edge all the time.
Unknown to Henry, the gang are under DEA surveillance.
DEA thought that Henry getting into the kind of trouble he was getting into after being involved in the witness protection program, that he deserved to be arrested.
The DEA throws Henry Hill into the worst place imaginable. Terminal Island Prison. It's a penitentiary just outside Los Angeles, run by the Gambinos, a mob family with close ties to Paul Vario.
The Gambinos certainly held sway. So when it became known that Henry Hill was one of the prisoners, he was in much more danger than he ever was on the outside. Basically, the guards guard the doors of the prisoners, regulate life within the prisons.
Paranoid about his safety, Hill gets word to Ed McDonald, his old contact from the Justice Department.
He contacted me and asked if I would write a letter for him. And I said, look, I can't write a letter recommending that you not go to prison. But what I can do is I can write a letter explaining the threats that you fear. And I can talk about your significance, your value as a witness.
The judge gives Hill a suspended sentence, and he enters an intense drug treatment program. Henry's luck has started to turn. He hears Paul Vario has died. The 73-year-old capo is no longer a threat.
It doesn't mean that he's completely out of the woods, but certainly it was a major relief to him.
But as long as Jimmy Burke is alive, Henry will always be looking over his shoulder. Henry is eventually released from drug treatment, but with no money and no protection, he is a sitting duck.
Henry lived every day looking over his shoulder. I mean, he was in constant fear that people in the world of organized crime were going to retaliate. They were going to come look for him and kill him.
There's a lot of people who would still want to make their name, people who would want to kill Henry just to impress people in organized crime.
But when his past catches up with him, it's not in the way he expects. Henry is approached by Nicholas Pileggi, an author keen to tell his story, and no one can predict what happens next. Hollywood legend Martin Scorsese wants to turn Hill's story into a movie. And Goodfellas transforms Henry's life.
He got to talk to Ray Liotta. He got to talk to Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci. He was like a hero. He would sign autographs.
The film should remind the mob of Henry's betrayal. But when it's released, it has an unexpected upside.
Goodfellas made Henry such a star. Those who wanted to see him dead no longer would go near him.
As the years pass, whatever lingering grudges the mob holds die. When in 1996, Jimmy Burke is taken by lung cancer. Henry Hill, the mob rat, has outlived all other Goodfellas.
He's the person that commits the largest crime in the history of the United States, and does so while being a complete screw-up.
And 40 years on from the Lufthansa heist, the loot has never been recovered.
We learned from Henry that a good part of the money was used in drug deals. So it wasn't like they were putting money in the bank or getting involved with mutual funds. They were using the money for sort of street deals.
But the real story is of a mob rat who put 50 gangsters behind bars.
I don't think he regretted for a moment. He ratted out his friends. I think he realized that that's what he had to do to save himself, and he didn't look back.
More by luck than design, Henry survives his time in the mob and witness protection. The day after his 69th birthday, he passes away at his home in Los Angeles.
Henry died in his bed the night after a great birthday party. is an extraordinary, successful life for a man that was Henry Hill.
The real Henry Hill was a guy who was a small-time wise guy who thought he could beat the system. And ultimately, you know what? I think Henry did beat the system.
In the hit movie American Made, Tom Cruise plays Barry Seal, a thrill-seeking pilot who smuggles cocaine for the Colombian cartels.
Barry Seal could fly anywhere. He could land just about anywhere. He knew his craft very well.
The CIA recruits him to fly daring missions, but it's not the real story.
There's no credible evidence that Barry Seal was ever a CIA asset.
But he was the biggest drug smuggler the US has ever seen.
He was a master criminal. He would smuggle anything from cocaine to marijuana. He did it all.
When Seal's caught, his life falls into the hands of two government agencies. The CIA, fighting the Nicaraguan Sandinistas, and the DEA, chasing Colombian drug kingpin Pablo Escobar.
He was the best informant they ever had.
This is the incredible life of the legend behind American Made. This is the real story of Barry Seal. Barry Seal's life started to unravel the moment Randy Beasley came looking for him. Beasley's been tipped off this is the place to find the smartest drug smuggler in Baton Rouge.
Barry Seal.
Adler Berriman Seal is known as Barry, a skilled pilot and adrenaline junkie. His ears prick up when Beasley says he needs help flying 1,200 pounds of Quaaludes out of South America.
He was always a guy who didn't think the rules applied to him. He thought he was smarter than everybody else. He had that arrogance that he could master any situation.
Seal boasts about running $1 million drug smuggling operation, flying cocaine from Colombia to the US.
He did tell Randy the routes he flew and the airplanes he used and why he was successful, that he bragged about it.
We have routes no one has caught down to yet.
And he gave away a lot of good information.
He feeds false rumors he works for the CIA and is protected by the government.
I'm protected by the CIA.
The story gives him an air of invincibility, and he starts believing that he's untouchable.
Stay safe, Barry.
He shot off his mouth to somebody he shouldn't have trusted, but did.
Seal doesn't know it yet, but he could face up to 10 years in jail.
Baton Rouge office, please. This is Special Agent Randy Beasley.
Seal's just spilled his secrets to an undercover DEA agent working on Operation Screamer, a mammoth sting targeting drug pilots.
I got the whole thing on tape.
When Seal started his career in his 20s, flying for Trans World Airlines, he could have gone all the way to the top.
He was the youngest TWA captain they ever had, which has to do with his capacity as a pilot.
But eventually Seal grows bored with the routine. And when a new acquaintance presents Seal with an opportunity to smuggle explosives, he jumps at the chance to make an extra buck. But his first foray into smuggling is a failure when he's busted in a customs sting. And although the case is dismissed in court, his career as an airline pilot is over.
He couldn't get a job with an airline again. Back in those days, he was pretty well paid, and when he lost his job, his lifestyle had to remain the same. He had a wife and kids. He also had to make a living to support his family.
Theirs was a very strong and powerful love affair. She worshipped Barry. She thought the world of him.
He wanted to make sure that his family was cared for. So when he lost his job, he went to the next best thing, which was smuggling.
He came along at the time that the drug trade in South Florida was really taking off. And there were a lot of people coming into the trade just for the fun of it.
After cutting his teeth smuggling marijuana, Seal quickly graduates to cocaine.
Cocaine, just by volume, is so much more lucrative than marijuana. 300 kilos of marijuana, that's not bad, but 300 kilos of cocaine is millions of dollars. That's why these gifted pilots all ended up moving from marijuana to cocaine. The money was just too great.
In just 3 years, Seal builds up a first-class smuggling operation. With a fleet of planes on a private airstrip 20 miles southeast of Baton Rouge.
He could have run an airline, probably. In fact, well, he was running an airline. Let's put it that way.
Seal figures out ingenious routes to get cocaine into the United States from Colombia. By flying over the Gulf of Mexico and along Louisiana's Gulf Coast. And brilliantly perfects the smuggling business using all the tricks of the trade. Flying in the dark with lights off and night vision goggles on. Passing low and slow to avoid detection.
Across the Gulf, his planes were often mistaken for helicopters. There's a lot of drilling rigs out in the Gulf. There's a lot of helicopter traffic between the rigs and shore.
Seal is careful not to get caught with the drugs he traffics. He uses swamp airdrops, bribes officials, and covertly exchanges the drugs for a cash delivery fee. But in 1979, the Honduran authorities find a firearm on board his plane, and he gets locked up in Central America. But he turns it to his advantage and makes a contact that connects him to the Medellin drug cartel in Colombia.
He was perfect for what the Medellin cartel at its inception needed, which was skilled pilots who were willing and able to go into some very rough territory.
When Seal starts smuggling for the biggest cartel in Colombia, he hits the big time, making his family very comfortable.
He was the kind of man who had come up in a period where you could be a smuggler and a family man. He viewed it as being a provider. On his son's 15th birthday, he gave him $10,000 in cash in 20s. And you have to be a bit of a family man to be that generous, but also he had the money.
And the money just keeps rolling in, despite the continuing US war on drugs.
Drugs are menacing our society. They're threatening our values and undercutting our institutions. They're killing our children.
Say yes to your life. And when it comes to drugs and alcohol, just say no.
I think Barry's view of smuggling was, you know, how much worse is marijuana and cocaine than alcohol and tobacco? He had that kind of viewpoint on it. And I think he felt like he was providing very well for his family.
To protect himself and his family, Seal keeps his identity secret. He has no direct contact with the drug cartel bosses, and the Colombians know him only as El Gordo, the fat man. He makes all his communication through payphones.
You always knew when Barry was coming because you could hear all these beepers going off by the time he hit the door.
He had a pager, and whenever anybody would call his answer service, he'd get a page, and he would go to the nearest payphone, which they had back in those days, and return the calls.
He makes sure his employees don't know each other.
People on the ground didn't know who the pilot was, allegedly. The pilot didn't know who the people on the ground were. Nobody knew when the load was coming in except the pilot and Barry. So by cutting down on the number of people involved and knowing what he was doing, when it was going to happen, he had a good chance of not getting caught.
Seal thinks he's outsmarted them all.
All the police knew, this guy is up to something bad, but they could never really catch him.
He had the brains, the guts, the will. He loved the game with the cops. He knew they were watching him, he knew they were trying to catch him, and he loved the fact that he could do this and they couldn't catch him.
Officer, arrest me. Go on.
But he's not as smart as he thinks, because Seal has been under surveillance by the DEA and the FBI for years.
We had 10 payphones being monitored. And that's a lot. You know, we didn't have any more equipment to handle that many phones.
This is why Special DEA Agent Randy Beasley has been called in to sting Barry Seal once and for all. And now Beasley has solid evidence of Seal telling him all about his drug smuggling operation. The DEA has him exactly where it wants him.
I got the whole thing on tape.
The sting results in a federal grand jury in Florida returning an indictment against Seal, and he's ordered to appear in court. After spilling the secrets of his well-honed drug smuggling operation to an undercover DEA agent, he's charged with conspiring to possess and distribute Quaaludes. In court, the charges against him are laid bare. But Seal thinks he's indestructible and won't take the bond hearing seriously. He tells ridiculous lies.
He's smart enough not to say I'm a smuggler, so he has to come up with something and maybe start accounting for some money.
Oil and shrimp dealer.
He claims he's an oil and shrimp dealer with annual earnings of just $250,000. But in truth, in 1982 and 1983, Seal imported 5,000 kilos of cocaine and grossed $25 million. Seal is confident. There's no way he's going down. But the jury finds him guilty. It's a bullet between the eyes. Seal is staring at a 10-year sentence. A family man at heart, Seal can't bear his wife Deborah seeing him locked up as a criminal.
He didn't want to go to jail at all, and most people don't. But he was looking at substantial time. He didn't see his kids. I mean, it's not like he was some ogre that didn't love his kids and wife. So I'm sure that bothered him too.
He makes a last-ditch plea and offers to become an informant for the DEA. Seal is dismissed as a consummate liar. But Bob Jura, new to the DEA's Miami division, is willing to take a chance. Jura and his partner Ernst Jake Jacobson decide to question Seal about what he can actually offer.
What you want, Barry? I've got whatever you like.
Bob Jura was a very experienced agent, very professional. Jake Jacobson had been in U.S. Customs. He had a little bit of a temper, but he was a really good guy. He had the ability, as a fellow Southerner, to relate to Barry Seal, to make Barry Seal feel comfortable.
You want the top one.
If Seal can deliver, they could stop the flow of illegal drugs into the country and make names for themselves.
Tell us something we ain't heard.
Seal looked like a hot mess. He was fat, he seemed to be undisciplined in the way he conducted himself, and he did some crazy things, or at least he said he did.
The classic Barry Seal kicked into operation, which is, I can find a way out of this. I'm gonna be the best informant they've ever had, and I'm gonna be such a good informant that I'm not gonna have to spend a day in jail. So that's when, the gears started working. Hey, I've got a lot to trade here. I have a lot of information, and I can give them a case that they've never seen. I can outsmart everybody once again.
Just when Seal is out of time, he takes one last desperate gambit and says he can deliver the DEA's most wanted.
I can get you Pablo Escobar.
Seal told a lot of stories. The most enticing and ridiculous was that he could get Pablo Escobar, he could get him on a plane and take him someplace where the DEA could arrest him. Escobar was notoriously slippery, surrounded by his own large army. So the idea that Pablo Escobar would get on an airplane with Barry Seal and fly away, that was pretty crazy.
The agents are intrigued by Seal's claim. If true, this could be the opportunity they've been looking for.
You have to try and verify. You can't take them just at their word. You have an obligation to find out if they are telling the truth or if they can do what they claim they can do. Otherwise, you're wasting your time.
But in the end, they looked at his actual record and they found it credible that he wasn't using drugs. And they had to weigh things. Is it worth taking a chance with this guy and sending him back down to Latin America? Had many debates about it and ended up saying, well, let's give it a try. What else we got?
As Seal talks and talks, the agents gradually become more convinced.
Things that he said checked out. He could be corroborated. They started to see Seal as a man who could produce hard evidence.
They were staring at the kind of case that would change their career. And I think they knew it.
Put your money where your mouth is.
The agents tell Seal to call up the Ochoa family direct. But in truth, Seal has never had any direct contact with the big dogs. He's lying again.
The DEA wanted to see if he could produce his promises. I mean, it sounded unbelievable.
Seal calls his contact for the Medellin cartel and introduces himself under a fake name, Ellis Mackenzie.
He picked up the phone and he says, I want to talk. I want to go to the top. I want to hold more and more and more.
We got the big one.
Seal says he wants to start flying more than 300 kilos of cocaine in one go.
He knew he was dealing with people who needed somebody like him. He knew that he offered them something that was very valuable. They needed money. They needed their cocaine to be moved.
The contact is interested and agrees to set up a face-to-face meeting with the cartel bosses. Against all odds, Seal has pulled a rabbit out of a hat.
Seal was going to try to get the heads of the Medellin cartel in a place where they could be arrested.
While the DEA agents make Seal no promises, they agree if he can deliver, his sentence would be significantly reduced.
The idea was if he made the biggest drug case ever, he probably wouldn't have to do much, if any, time. And that was his goal. I mean, he was staring at a 10-year sentence.
Seal has successfully bought himself more time, and his sentencing is withheld to see what he can do for the government. Now officially a DEA informant, Seal goes out on a limb to prove himself.
And so he went from a very successful bad guy to a very successful good guy. And he put the same amount of energy into trying to atone for his sins and get himself out of trouble that he'd put into getting himself into trouble.
If he was the best and smartest smuggler, he was going to be the best and smartest informant. So he was entirely professional. He also knew his life was on the line, but he still took incredible risks.
Seal's enthusiasm for his new role knows no bounds. He self-funds his missions, uses his own planes, and buys his own fuel.
All these guys are adventure junkies. Everybody wants to be a pirate. All little boys, when they're little, they want to be a cowboy, they want to be a pirate. Adult pirates. Nothing else changes. But flying into the Ochoa estate, into the heartland of cocaine country, was just fabulous. It was a coup.
He was flying incredibly dangerous missions into the heart of the cartel and their estates. Las Loma, he went there. He went into the belly of the beast.
Push up, hands up! Hands up!
Going down there to meet with them in person, you know, he didn't know that he wouldn't be compromised.
On your knees.
He didn't know that he could be stepping into a death sentence.
Under the alias Ellis Mackenzie, Seal is introduced to the heads of the cartel, Jorge Ochoa and Pablo Escobar.
The Medellin cartel were known as the most ruthless criminals, perhaps in the history of the world.
Ochoa tells Seal they've been stocking up to supply crowds attending the 1984 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles.
And they knew that there would be a great demand for cocaine. So their plan was to get 3,300 pounds into Miami and then get that west to Los Angeles and make a fortune, and this would have been a very big score.
It's more than Seal's ever trafficked in one go, but he agrees willingly.
It was a sign of his desperation, his willingness to do this, their desperation, their willingness to take this risk because they needed to move these loads of cocaine. They needed Barry Seal, he needed them. And it was clearly now on the knife edge of life and death for him.
And the stakes are about to get even higher for Seal. The Colombian government has declared war on drug traffickers, and the cartel is desperate for a new location. The Sandinista government in Nicaragua has come to the aid of the Medellin cartel and offered a protected hub for its drugs.
They had a new base and a new partner, a new ally in their smuggling, and it was the Sandinista government. So their plan was to essentially use a Sandinista military base as a transshipment point for their cocaine, which would allow a much better refueling situation and which would provide them security at a time in 1984 when they really needed it, and would have provided the Sandinista with funds that they could have used.
The cartel bosses want Seal to fly their drugs via this Nicaragua base. It's a dangerous demand, because the new Sandinista government is officially a communist enemy of the United States.
My fellow Americans, I must speak to you tonight about a mounting danger in Central America that threatens the security of the United States. This danger will not go away. It will grow worse, much worse, if we fail to take action now. I'm speaking of Nicaragua, a Soviet ally on the American mainland, only 2 hours flying time from our own borders.
In an effort to overthrow the Sandinistas, the US is funding a local militia, the Contras, but it's highly controversial.
The question the Congress of the United States will now answer is a simple one. Will we give the Nicaraguan democratic resistance the means to recapture their betrayed revolution, or will we turn our backs and ignore the malignancy in Managua until it spreads and becomes a mortal threat to the entire New World?
Only 2 hours away from our borders. All of this, only 2 hours away from where we live. Support the president on Nicaragua. Here is terrorism we can do something about if we support the president on Nicaragua.
By promising the cartel he'll fly into Nicaragua, Seal will put himself in the middle of a brewing and potentially deadly conflict between his own country and a Soviet-backed revolution in Central America. But the operation is put on hold while Seal attends court to be sentenced on his drug smuggling charges. He's confident his status as an informant will keep him out of jail. Until the judge shocks everyone.
10 years minimum.
The judge or the officials weren't aware that he was involved in a live DEA operation.
His DEA handlers fear they've lost a highly connected informant in the midst of pulling off the biggest US case of its kind.
It was a frantic period because this incredibly intense undercover operation is going on.
Jura and Jacobson pull out all the stops to get Seal released on an appeal bond. His unexpected release is sure to raise suspicions that Barry Seal has flipped. But Seal is still bound to continue his undercover work. His next mission to Colombia could be his last.
If you break one rule when you're a DEA informant, all bets are off. The whole deal crashes. So he took it very seriously because that was his one ticket to a lighter sentence and freedom soon.
As Ellis Mackenzie, Seal continues smuggling for the cartel alongside his trusted longtime co-pilot, Emil Camp. Neither Camp nor the cartel have any idea Seal is really working for the DEA.
They knew who Ellis Mackenzie was, they knew who the El Gordo and the Fat Man were, but by keeping the names separate, it was hard for them to know that Barry Seal was the person they were dealing with.
But the Colombian drug cartel's demands just keep getting bigger.
Weight is everything when you're smuggling any drug. And Seal was always very cognizant of that.
Barry apparently told him, no, we can't do that, the plane's overloaded, which supposedly was waving a machine gun and said this flight's gonna go. So Barry, against his better judgment, tried to take off, and the way I understand it, he was on a dirt strip. It was sloppy, muddy. The plane could not get up to speed to take off, and it crashed.
You're right.
Luckily, Seal and his co-pilot escape without injury. Ochoa provides a second plane that fares better with the extra load. But their flight hasn't been cleared with the Nicaraguan authorities. They're fired on by an anti-aircraft battery.
The fixer apparently neglected to tell the Army that Seal would be taken off with a load of dope. He didn't get killed, but it probably scared him a bit, even though he's a good pilot.
Seal is forced to make an emergency landing, and yet again ends up in jail, this time in Nicaragua. Back in Florida, Seal's DEA handlers reach out to the CIA for help tracking him down. It's a mistake that will cost them their mission.
The DEA didn't know whether he was dead or alive, so they went to the CIA and said, you got connections down there. Find out if this guy named Barry Seal is dead or alive or in jail. And that's when the CIA first heard about him.
The CIA is fascinated to hear there's a cocaine operation in Nicaragua. If Seal can prove it, there's an opportunity to discredit the Sandinistas.
The national security team of the Reagan White House was looking for every opportunity to get damaging evidence against the Sandinistas. So any chance to show that the Sandinistas were not only murderous but corrupt would be excellent. To do that, the CIA desperately wanted photographs because corroboration is terribly important. Having some fat guy come back from Nicaragua and say, hey, I met with the Sandinistas, that wouldn't carry any water. It would not influence American opinion, but people were terribly upset about cocaine, and this was an opportunity to influence the American public.
This would have been a very important part of the propaganda war. See, not only are they communists, but they're communist drug smugglers, which made them even worse. So it would have been a giant propaganda coup.
After spending the night in a Nicaraguan jail, Seal eventually gets released. But not by the CIA, by Federico Vaughn, a Sandinista official and friend of the Medellin cartel. Seal flies back to the US in one of Escobar's planes. When Seal returns to the US, the CIA has hatched a plan to get proof linking the Sandinistas to illegal drugs.
Barry Seal played into this policy by being on the ground and possibly able to provide evidence of the Sandinista corruption, particularly photographic evidence. So that's why the CIA proposed that it attach a camera to the plane that Seal was flying.
Despite Seal's protests, cameras are attached to his new bigger plane, the Fat Lady. This is the only direct involvement the CIA ever has with Barry Seal. If this risky mission goes wrong and the drug lords figure out what Seal is up to, it's game over.
He would have ended up without a head, disemboweled, hung from a tree, God knows what, and it would have happened very slowly.
He knows how the Ochoas deal with informers. But the drugs cartel is now the least of his problems. Seal's on the front line in the US war against communism. With no alternative but a prison sentence, Seal sets out on his mission to double-cross one of the most dangerous regimes in the world. With no protection and accompanied by his long-term employee, Emil Camp, Seal lands their new bigger plane, the Fat Lady. It's capable of transporting 24,000 pounds of cargo. The men are surrounded by Sandinista military on an isolated jungle airbase. There's no way of knowing they won't end up shot dead on the spot. But it couldn't turn out better when Federico Vaughan appears with Pablo Escobar.
Lo and behold, there's everything that he'd hoped for. The Sandinista officials, Sandinista soldiers, and Pablo Escobar. They got 1,500 pounds of cocaine, which they load onto the airplane. And he gets photos.
At any moment, the cameras could be discovered. The tension is unbearable.
You can imagine, here you are in the middle of a jungle with a bunch of dedicated killers and illegal government officials, and you're taking pictures of them. It had to be a very high adrenaline situation.
Astonishingly, Federico Vaughan and Pablo Escobar help load the plane.
Why would Pablo Escobar load a duffel bag of cocaine on a plane? He had to have been caught up in the moment. It had to have been viewed as kind of a ceremonial thing, like a dignitary hitting a ship with a champagne bottle. Same with Federico Vaughan. They could have had soldiers do that.
Escobar and Vaughan are both caught red-handed on camera, along with Seal.
They trusted Seal. They thought they were 100% safe.
The photos will cement Seal as the DEA's #1 informant, but they will also signal his end. When the DEA agents see the photos, they celebrate. It's proof their man Seal has delivered, and it's only a matter of time before he leads Escobar to somewhere they can arrest him. But events are about to overtake them. When Washington sees the pictures of Federico Vaughan loading drugs bound for the US, excitement levels hit the roof. It's just what the government needs to discredit the Sandinistas.
It was a little too much for everybody. It was the most sterling evidence you can get of drug smuggling. Here's the drug smuggler loading the plane. Here's a picture of it. Here is the Sandinista official next to him loading the plane. It was too good to be true. It ended up burning a hole in the investigation.
Seal is enjoying his success as the DEA's top informant when he gets the worst news of his life. Details of the mission have been leaked to the press, and Barry Seal is outed as a DEA informant.
There was a great deal of anger about that certain people in the government disclosed it against the knowledge and against the promises to Barry that it wouldn't be disclosed.
The DEA is furious. The story has blown the cover of a mid-operation informant, positioned to make one of the most significant criminal drug cases in American history.
Barry Seal almost brought them the cartel on a silver platter. If there had not been a leak of his mission in that Washington Times article, they might have captured all of them in 1984. That would have changed history.
But for Seal, it's game over. His mission with the DEA is dead in the water, and the CIA leaves him high and dry.
CIA often burns assets. The intelligence gathering mission is considered far more important than individuals.
Worst of all, the cartel now knows Seal's identity and puts a bounty on his head. $500,000 dead, or $1 million alive.
The Medellin cartel was very violent. It didn't matter who you were. You crossed them, you got in your way, you were dead.
Seal's roller coaster ride as an informer has put his family in grave danger.
When Seal realized that he was a target, and he would have known that immediately because he knew the cartel, he put his family into hiding.
But Seal can't go into hiding with them because he's due to appear in court. There's nowhere to hide in the packed Louisiana courtroom. And it's clear the judge is unhappy with Seal's plea deal.
When we got to court that morning, the courtroom was full, and it was full of policemen. Louisiana, high-ranking policemen. State police, FBI, DEA, and U.S. attorneys. They're not all coming down to court to watch Barry Seal be told he's going to be on probation.
Even Seal's Florida DEA handlers can't get him off the hook.
Barry had said, these two guys are the guys I'm working for, and they'll help me. And then they got sent home. They didn't get to testify.
But because of Seal's plea agreement, Judge Polizzola is unable to incarcerate the drug smuggler.
The judge did not like the deal. But after vigorous arguments by the federal prosecutor, he grudgingly accepted it.
Instead, the judge gives Seal the toughest sentence he can. 6 months probation in Baton Rouge, with no guns and no bodyguards with guns. But even worse than that, he orders Seal to reside at a Salvation Army Community Treatment Center. The final nail in the coffin comes when the judge reads out the address to the open court. The Salvation Army Community Treatment Center on Airline Highway, Baton Rouge.
He said where the community service was going to be, and that would identify where Barry Seal was each and every day. And that was a terrible, terrible error. The cartel had representatives there, so you can only call it a death sentence because once the cartel has your address, where you're staying, that's it. It, in fact, was a death sentence.
Seal has no choice but to stick to the terms of the probation. It takes just 3 weeks for the inevitable moment to come. Gary Seal dies instantly when 7 .45 caliber bullets hit his head, chest, and neck. The Medellin cartel successfully took revenge for what it considered the ultimate betrayal. The disgraced airline pilot who turned to smuggling to provide for his family and made a fortune trafficking cocaine before cutting a deal with the government to escape jail is now dead.
When he died basically broke. Supposedly, he used a lot of his funds to do the things that he did for the government. I don't think they could get money to pay for him to do the stuff that he was allowed to do.
It's believed Seal's family were left to survive on his life insurance.
The IRS seized everything, I mean, down to the water in the refrigerator, I believe. They took everything there was. But he did get his life insurance. It turns out that even for taxes, they can't take your life insurance. So he had a pretty good life insurance policy, and I think that's what has sustained his family since then.
Although Seal never took down Pablo Escobar, he died the DEA's #1 informant.
He was really the first informant who penetrated the cartel inner sanctum, and he brought them the biggest case they'd ever had. These were unprecedented feats of daring do and law enforcement ingenuity that the DEA had never seen. So clearly, up until his death, he was the best informant they ever had.
A month after Seal's murder, President Reagan displays the photos on national television as ammunition in the US struggle against communism.
The Sandinistas have even involved themselves in the international drug trade. I know every American parent concerned about the drug problem will be outraged to learn that top Nicaraguan government officials are deeply involved in drug trafficking. This picture, secretly taken at a military airfield outside Managua, shows Federico Vaughn, a top aide to one of the 9 commandantes who rule Nicaragua, loading an aircraft with illegal narcotics bound for the United States. No, there seems to be no crime to which the Sandinistas will not stoop. This is an outlaw regime.
As cocaine trafficking explodes in the 1980s, America witnesses a real-life drama unfold on its streets. Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel become the most powerful criminal organization the world has ever seen.
The Medellin cartel were the cocaine trade in the 1980s.
It isn't long before Hollywood adopts these ready-made tales of violence, sex, drugs, and money as a new movie genre, centered around the cocaine cartels. The 2016 movie The Infiltrator tells how Robert Meza, a former IRS man turned undercover US customs agent, poses as a money launderer and infiltrates the Medellin cartel. But what the movie doesn't tell you is the deeper Robert infiltrates, the more the cartels suspect he's actually a federal agent.
You cannot make a mistake. They'll make a way to lure you in and kill you.
When he's finally called out by the cartel, his only hope is to put these men behind bars or face retribution.
If they found who he was, they would cut him up little pieces and feed him to the animals.
This is the real story of the Infiltrator, the tax man who wreaks havoc inside the Medellin cartel. Undercover US Customs agent Robert Meza has spent years infiltrating the Medellin drug cartel, a criminal enterprise flooding the US with cocaine. Now he prepares for one of the most important drug prosecutions in US Customs history.
Hello?
Is that our compromised friend?
Who's this?
The Medellin cartel has placed a $500,000 bounty on Robert's head.
The culture of Colombia is one that's very much fixated on vengeance, vendetta, retribution.
In this business, if you betray them, you'll die.
He was very, very worried about the family, and he was dedicated to do whatever he had to do to protect them.
The terrified man is just out observing the nocturnal behavior of alligators local to the area.
You knew at the beginning this might happen, but you did the job anyway.
Robert Meza is paying the price for taking on the cartel.
Drugs are menacing our society. They're killing our children. Despite our best efforts, illegal cocaine is coming into our country at alarming levels. It is an uncontrolled fire.
Just say no.
Despite a high-profile campaign, America is losing the war on drugs. Even with the full force of the DEA, FBI, and US Customs, tens of thousands of kilos of cocaine still flow into the US each year.
The Medellin cartel were the cocaine trade in the 1980s. They had a virtual stranglehold over the distribution of cocaine.
Headed by the notorious drug lord Pablo Escobar, the Medellin cartel are only getting stronger. As a main import hub, Florida is particularly feeling the brunt.
They took violence to a whole new height.
It was a war zone down there, a war zone.
In Tampa, US Customs agents try to stem the violence by stopping the drugs reaching American soil. But they're discovering that's easier said than done.
You can talk about the cartel, but you need to know the actual people. Who are the individuals? Who are the suspects?
And that was the problem. The individuals ferrying the cocaine were like ghosts.
We didn't actually understand how the organization worked. We didn't have the intel to identify the middle and above managers.
The department needs a fresh approach. Robert Meza joins from the Internal Revenue Service, an expert not in trafficking, but in tax evasion. It's obvious from the start that his new colleagues are struggling to nail the individuals getting the cocaine into Florida. But Meza has an accountant's eye. Perhaps the answer isn't to follow the drugs at all, but to follow the money. Robert takes this new approach to his supervisor. Pablo Escobar alone makes upwards of $400 million a week. But he has a problem. Before it can be transferred back to Colombia, it has to be made to appear legit. That is the work of money launderers.
It's a business. Without money launderers, without people to move the cash for you, you're dead in the water.
Money launderers own or control perfectly legal cash-heavy businesses, like parking lots or taxi companies. They run off false receipts through these businesses, inventing cash from customers who never actually existed. This phantom money is replaced with all too real drug money. And once it's in the bank, it appears to be clean. Robert suggests customs watch who the money goes to after it's laundered.
You're not going to debilitate an organization by taking the dough. You have to take the money. You go after the money. And if you go after the money, you'll always find the bigger bad guys.
By following the money, agents can fill in the blanks of the cartel's family tree. A money launderer would be in an ideal position. It's Meza's speciality. He has to go undercover as a money launderer inside the Medellin cartel. Amir Abreu is assigned as his undercover partner.
We got coached by Bob Meza. I had no experience what I was facing. but he really gave us good ideas what to do and how to do it.
Amir hits the streets, working informants, looking for any weak link in the cartel chain they can exploit. Gonzalo Mora Jr. is a small-time money broker who needs to launder cash for the cartel. The amount he handles is tiny, but it gives Amir a way in. Over many months, he works undercover, gaining Mora's trust by collecting cash from street dealers.
We were doing small amounts. As I recall, one of the first pickup was $400. I mean, that's nothing. I guess in a way he was like testing us. If my story believable to these people, how about if they think, oh, these people might be federal agents. Why are they pushing so hard?
Meanwhile, US Customs begin creating Robert's undercover identity. It's called backstopping. Every aspect of his cover story needs to be backed up by records appearing to go back decades.
Say a bad guy met Bob. First thing we'd do is check his background. So we had all that built in with credit cards and bank accounts and addresses and utility bills and stuff that you wouldn't think about. So we had all this backstopping done. It's extensive and it's time-consuming. It has to be done right.
It takes a full 18 months before Robert Meza becomes Robert Musella, a money launderer with ties to the New York mob. When Amir feels the time is right, he tells Mora about his boss, Robert Musella, who can launder larger sums of money.
We told Mora that Major was a big-time money launderer with mafia ties in New York. So that it really opens Mora's eye. Let him know that I had a guy that will do major amounts of money.
Finally, Mora bites and asks Amir to introduce him.
We thought that was a huge step forward. We were extremely excited about it.
Operation Currency Chase, known as Sea Chase to the agents, has begun. Robert Musella is ready to enter the world of the Colombian cartels. But not before he's given a lesson in the dangers of slipping up.
We knew what happened to an undercover agent, DEA agent. He got lured in and he got killed while doing his undercover work.
The fact that an agent would be kidnapped and tortured, that's always running in your mind.
Winning over Mora will mean an introduction to Escobar's organization. The agents take the Colombian to one of Tampa's infamous strip clubs.
It's no longer in business. It used to be the old Tanga Lounge.
Welcome. I'm gonna have a little dance with you tonight.
Robert and Amir treat Mora to the lounge's notorious after-hours entertainment.
Someone's having some fun tonight, like I said.
It was late at night, and he had a lot of fun. He asked me, can I have a lap dance? I said, of course you could have a lap dance.
Robert and Amir wait while Mora has a good time.
He went and had his lap dance. He came out laughing, very happy.
When Robert feels the time is right, he explains the service he can offer.
The story was, meet my boss, let him utilize the bank network he's got. It takes all the threat out of this. You don't have to physically move the money. We'll come and get it. It sounded good.
Robert tells Mora he can launder huge amounts of money, more than the Colombian can handle.
he really stressed, I want to make more money out of these deals. And that was easy to manipulate in our case. If you want to make money, you got to bring us good clients.
To celebrate, Mora hands a dancer a wad of cash and directs her to Robert.
He's cute. How about you and me go somewhere quiet?
Probably most made men worth their salt would happily slip away with the woman. But US Customs might have other ideas.
Everything we do, we have to testify to it in court. You can't do bad things, because if you do, you'll blow the case. We're supposed to be the good guys.
If Mora smells something is wrong, the operation will be blown before it's started.
Aw, are you too shy?
Robert decides to play the lovesick fool.
I got a fiance.
He tells Mora he has a fiancé too hot to jeopardize.
Oh, don't worry. She can watch.
It was a great excuse. Look, I'm gonna marry. I don't want no deal with women. Having a fiancé was excellent idea.
And Mora offers to pass Robert's name to more associates in Colombia. If it comes good, it's a big step up the Medellin ladder. With the cartel on board, Mesa's next challenge is to open a dirty bank account with a legitimate bank. The Medellin cartel favor banks in Panama. They have strict privacy laws and don't ask questions. But Robert is worried they might have links to the cartel.
All it takes is one slip or somebody there telling the bad guys that, hey, you know, this is the cops, and you lose totally control of your operation, and it's over with.
So Robert approaches the Bank of Credit and Commerce International to open an account as his undercover identity, Robert Musella. It's a tricky situation. The bank can't know what he's up to, but banks are trained to sniff out money laundering. From the start, it's clear that the account manager smells a rat.
The guy, no shock, no, there's the door.
You think we can help you?
They started to talk and communicate what they could do for one another.
Not only does this respected international bank not care about money laundering, they offer him advice.
One of the BCCI officers told Bob that in money laundering business, only the stupid people get caught. And they convinced Bob that if he would partner with them, the likelihood of him ever being caught was almost nothing.
Robert had stumbled across corruption on a scale he had never imagined. And he had it all on tape. But he stores it away. For the moment, he has bigger fish to fry. US Customs received good news. Mora has been busy drumming up business in Medellin. Roberto Alcaíno, a cocaine smuggler and money launderer, is interested in what they have to offer.
Mora was the one who told us about Alcaíno. He said, they call him Duro. A Duro is a guy who's a big, big trafficker. Now we know that we got a major target.
But it's clear the cartel is still wary. Alcaíno is flying into Tampa and expects to meet Robert's fiancée. With the meeting set, they need a female agent, fast. US Customs assign rookie agent Kathy Ertz.
Kathy had a lot of catching up to do. Not knowing Bob previously, developing a mechanism to portray themselves as a for real couple. That's a problem. It's a big problem.
When you're dealing with killers, trivial details are the difference between life and death.
The bad guys will inevitably separate the two, test them together, separate them again, test them together. If they don't get the story right, both of them are going to die.
Ready or not, the newly engaged agents have to make their debut. From the start, it's clear their new target is in a different league. And Kathy is a novice undercover agent.
Alcaíno was a sophisticated guy. The way he dressed, the way he behaved himself. So you're not dealing with a street guy. You're dealing with a businessman.
Roberto.
With so much at stake, Robert has to tread carefully. He sticks to his now familiar routine and explains the money laundering services he can offer, dropping numbers that he hopes will whet Alcaíno's appetite. For rookie agent Kathy, she moves into uncharted territory.
Have you ever had a Poirot?
Kathy will be able to deal directly as a female with Alcaíno. Remember, these people are female happy.
I see big things in your future.
She's held his hand, she's looked into his eyes, she has, talked about his hopes and dreams for the future. She was fulfilling something that a male undercover probably couldn't have.
You're going to be a great success.
They'll be willing to forgive more from her and from him because she's done that.
Your star is rising.
It seems that the undercover rookie is a natural.
Initially, we brought her in to keep Bob from being compromised, but as it turned out, it's quite an asset to the investigation.
Kathy may have passed the test, but some in Escobar's inner circle suspect Robert is a Fed.
You need to go to Colombia and meet them.
Alcaíno tells him he needs to travel to Colombia to convince them mano a mano. In the movie The Infiltrator, Robert travels to meet with the cartel, but the reality is, it's far too dangerous for customs to allow.
If he was on a ranch in Colombia and they found who he was, they would cut him up little pieces and feed him to the animals.
The movie also omits a key incident that threatens to upend the whole operation. An informant from a previous case spots Robert across the room.
The guy was going to speak to Bob, and Bob was able to grab him by the arm and tell him, I'm in a role here, don't say nothing.
But neither of them realize Alcaíno has followed Robert and is standing behind them.
Everything could be lost from the entire operation in that moment. He's absolutely dependent on the informant at that point to save his life.
The man breaks the silence.
Well, Bob, you're gonna make loads of money together.
Well, that's good. Shall we sit?
Yeah.
The guy understood, having previous involvement with the government, and we were able to avoid a catastrophe, a serious issue.
The Colombia ultimatum is lost in the informant's act, and Alcaíno even offers to introduce them to more cartel bigwigs. With an increasing cartel client base, Robert is laundering bigger sums of cash. And Amir isn't trawling the streets collecting small envelopes anymore. He's picking up huge amounts from the cartel's cash couriers. Amir's in Los Angeles collecting a bulk cash shipment of the cartel's money. Their cash couriers like to do drops on the street, but any street deal leaves the agents vulnerable to a hit and run.
If we could prearrange the money transfer, the handoff, in a hotel, any environment that we could control. That's the best way to do it for the safety of the undercover agents.
Amir needs to lure her into his cheap hotel to a room that's been bugged by the agency.
I said, do you really want to do this here? It's going to be kind of suspicious. And she said, yeah, we could do it in your room.
But it's clear that she's prepared for trouble.
That's when I noticed an Uzi machine gun. It was the first time that I saw an open weapon available for them.
Bugged room or not, the gun puts Amir at a dangerous disadvantage.
It certainly would make Amir concerned, very concerned, because he doesn't have a weapon.
Amir must walk a fine line. The courier is obviously prepared for a setup.
She was really getting anxious, thinking that everything was being recorded. I said, well, I'm new here. I really don't want to get caught doing something bad in the street. I was able to put it at ease. Her son was telling her the same thing. Hey, he has a good point.
But inside the room, he sees something that could put a quick end to the meeting and his life.
The technicians, they made a mistake. When they closed the door, the wire leading from the recording apparatus, it was busted.
Let me walk you through the door first.
It's going to take some very quick thinking, which is not easy under that kind of pressure.
Amir gets away with it this time. But the cartel still harbors deep suspicions. They've employed their own surveillance teams to watch the money launderers. Operation Sea Chase is gathering huge amounts of intel on the cartel's top players. But the agents' activities are unexpectedly halted.
What?
Without consultation, the US government impose a crackdown on rogue dictator Manuel Noriega and freeze all bank accounts in Panama, specifically Robert's go-to bank, BCCI. There's $750,000 in dope money now being held in limbo. And the cartel will surely not care to hear excuses about who is to blame. Getting access to the money without blowing their cover is now up to the team. Somehow, Robert has to bypass the international embargo and get the cartel's money out. Robert meets his BCCI contact and makes sure he understands the danger they're all in.
Have you ever heard of the Medellin cartel?
In this business, they will make sure that either you pay with the money or you pay with your life.
With some creative accounting, the bank manager suggests a way to unfreeze the cartel's money. Once unlocked, they'll transfer the money to a Geneva branch outside the jurisdiction of the US ban. Robert's move not only keeps his operation alive, it unexpectedly boosts his reputation within the cartel.
It showed to the cartel they could move money right under the nose of a US enforced freeze. It enhanced their position in the eyes of the cartel. So that's got to be big, huge.
And the timing couldn't be better. The cartel is planning a huge European expansion and needs someone to handle the money. It's the break the US Customs team is waiting for. In an exclusive Parisian nightclub, Robert, Kathy, and Amir meet the masterminds behind the cocaine invasion of Europe. The man they need to impress is Rudolf Armbrecht, the cartel's European representative.
Rudolf Ambrecht was not an easy guy to read. Very serious. For me, that's kind of difficult. Very difficult.
Rudolf, can I have your hand?
But they'll have to pull out all the stops.
Why not?
Ambrecht opens the door to Escobar himself.
Wow, I see great success. You're gonna make a lot of money.
We knew that Ambrecht was taking people that could make a final decision.
Good for me, no?
We trust you guys, or they might be testing us to another level.
And the stakes rise to unprecedented levels when they receive an unexpected guest. Santiago Uribe, a lawyer and trusted advisor to Pablo Escobar himself. Win this man over, and they're inside Escobar's inner circle. Robert lays out the services they can offer. He tells the Colombians he's in so deep with BCCI, he can launder industrial levels of the cartel's money.
Uribe was the top guy. He might tell Ambrecht, you know what? We should pack our bags and go home. I don't like these people.
But Uribe likes what he hears and agrees to use them for their European business. Robert is now a money manager for the biggest cocaine cartel in the world. The opportunity to gather intelligence is endless. His plan to follow the money is allowing the agency to identify key players in the cartel. And the agents soon receive an unexpected gift, one of the cartel's trafficking routes. Alcaíno tells Robert he has a factory in Buenos Aires, packing a huge shipment of cocaine destined for the US.
Packing the cocaine as I speak.
It's hidden inside boxes of anchovies, marked with a black dot.
Essentially just tell him, Bob, I've got a big shipment of cocaine coming in. When it gets in, I collect. You're my money man.
Robert's money trail has led him to an enormous shipment of cocaine. The sting operation promises to land his team their first big cartel fish. The agents are riding high when a phone call changes everything. Ambrecht tells Robert they've spotted customs agents tailing the cartel's cash couriers. Medellin are more suspicious than ever that Robert and his operation are federal agents. Ambrecht throws him a terrifying challenge. Come and explain himself in person.
I'll come.
It's a terrible dilemma. The meeting could be a setup.
I told Major, you cannot make a mistake with this guy. They'll make a way to lure you in and kill you. We knew what happened to an undercover agent, DEA agent. He got lured in and he got killed.
But the cartel's upper echelons are within his grasp. If he wants to win back their trust, he can't risk having a backup team following him.
Sometimes the undercover operator will say, well, I want this to succeed so badly, I'm willing to put myself even more in harm's way to make it happen.
Robert makes his decision. He's going in without backup. When Robert Mesa walks unprotected into a meeting in Miami called by the Medellin cartel, his life is in more danger than it has ever been.
You need to be the kind of person that doesn't have dry mouth or hands sweaty or physically shaking, because that obviously will negate all your efforts.
Just sit.
You need a significant amount of confidence and to know that at any moment something very terrible and usually quite violent could happen.
You need to explain yourself.
Ambrecht gets straight to the point. People in his organization suspect Robert is working for the US government. Robert goes on the offensive and does something no undercover agent would do. He breaks protocol and offers to travel to Colombia to meet the cartel in person.
If he's willing to put himself entirely at that kind of mercy and to make that sort of gesture, there's no way he can be believed to be anything other than how he represents himself. He's believable.
Okay.
Armbrecht backs down.
I guess you have some documents to show me.
Robert starts to breathe a little easier.
He opens up his briefcase and he's looking at the tape machine, and the bad guy's on the other side.
For the moment, Armbrecht can't see the tape recorder.
In this moment, staring you in the face is the very evidence that you just threw your whole life on the tracks in order to refute.
You just have to think on your feet, I guess, and do what you gotta do. You're just trying to survive. You just sort of calmly put it back up again.
Disaster is averted, but Armbrecht leaves with a warning shot across his bow. If Robert ever turns out to be a Fed, there won't be a hole deep enough for him to hide in. The die is cast. The only way that Robert, Amir, and Kathy can get out is to put these men behind bars. Alcaíno's cocaine shipment has reached port. He has no idea that the men unloading the cargo are undercover US Customs and DEA agents. But as he checks his cargo, he realizes something is wrong. Some of the dock workers don't look like men used to carrying heavy cargo. Alcaíno decides to make a break for it. But he's spotted. Alcaíno and his men are seized.
You play with fire, you're liable to get burned. And exactly the same way that Alcaíno told Major, the cocaine was in marked boxes with a black dot.
The federal agents uncover a record 2,500 pounds of cocaine. By following the money, they've done something that US Customs was unable to achieve.
That was the first big shipment we were able to interdict. Every day we had to get up and worry about having proven to the court that this was drug money. Now we actually have hundreds of keys of cocaine.
But with one of their own behind bars, the cartel is on high alert. And a phone call from Alcaíno's wife threatens to derail the entire investigation. The team brace for the worst, but are thrown completely off guard by what they hear. Incredibly, while Alcaíno is behind bars, he wants Robert to take over his cocaine interests.
It was a coup, so it gave Bob the opportunity to get all the information Alcaíno had.
With more than enough information, and the cartel none the wiser, the agents decide to make a move. But they need a plausible excuse to get the entire cartel operation in Tampa at the same time. Within weeks, they receive invitations to Robert and Kathy's wedding. As guests arrive, they're told about a surprise bachelor party for Robert.
They were all invited to come to a private club in downtown Tampa with exotic dancers and unlimited drinks.
The Colombian drug runners and crooked bankers are unaware they're heading into a trap.
Gonzalo Mora on the way, he said, are they gonna have women there? I said, yeah. Are they gonna have white, blonde women there? Yeah.
You think I'm gonna get a screw? I think you're gonna get a screw.
And I look at him and said, Gonzalo, for sure, tonight you're gonna get screwed.
You'll see.
As the men arrive, they're greeted by US Customs officers. Incredibly, some of the men think it's part of the bachelor party.
Hey, I've been in a party like this before. Where are the women? Huh?
One or two thought this was just a part of the deal. You get handcuffs on before you meet the exotic dancer.
To keep up appearances in the cartel, and for Amir's safety, he's the first to be taken down.
When they arrested us, I put a show for Mora, like I'm fighting the guy who's arresting me.
Don't say a word! Don't say a word! Come on! Take it easy, you!
I told Mora, Musela will get us out. Don't say anything.
Don't have fun! Don't say a word! Don't say a word!
The plan plays out perfectly. The cartel men and the BCCI bankers are in custody.
It was such an effort for 3 or 4 years. We were on thin ice an awful lot, and we survived.
Undercover work? I love undercover work.
Operation Sea Chase is over. But the cartel has long memories, and Robert is in their sights. For Robert's betrayal, the Medellin cartel has put a $500,000 bounty on his head. US Customs isn't taking any chances. His testimony will be key to making the charges stick. Robert's identity is changed, and he's forced to live in a safe house, always under the shadow of retribution.
Hello?
Is that our compromised friend?
Who's this?
There's always what ifs. You're constantly watching. It's very fatiguing. You knew at the beginning this might happen, but you did the job anyway.
The stress of living life one moment from death was getting to him. After a year and a half building the case, the US Customs agents prepare to testify. Robert and Amir come face to face with the men they've betrayed. Everything comes down to their performance on the stand.
Doing the undercover case is easy. When the work starts, it's when you got it prepared to go to court. I'd rather do the undercover than do the hard work preparing for trial. Bob spent almost 2.5 months testifying. I spent like 15 days. I couldn't eat.
Robert and Amir are cross-examined for over 3 months. In the end, their testimony leads to the arrests of more than 85 drug smugglers and crooked bankers. The seizure of more than 3,000 pounds of cocaine, fines and forfeitures worth $2 billion in today's money, and the collapse of BCCI, the world's 7th largest private bank. Operation Sea Chase is regarded as one of the most successful undercover operations in US Customs history.
Sea Chase is unparalleled. The indictment and taking down of a private bank, in that respect, is in first place. In terms of the number of cartel figures, it was one of the biggest. I'm very proud of the effort that hundreds of people put forward. It's something I'll never experience again.
It's the story that demands to be told. The rise from small-time crook to New York drug baron.
Frank Lucas was an incredible street dealing boss.
The first Harlem gangster to turn the tables on the mafia.
Frank cut out the mafia so he could deliver direct.
Creating a drug network responsible for a countrywide epidemic.
You can't overstate how bad the problem was.
Frank Lucas's rise and fall inspires the hit movie American Gangster. But Hollywood got the wrong guy. The real American Gangster was an ex-army sergeant in control of a vast heroin network. This drug lord is untouchable until Frank Lucas exacts revenge.
He who has the dope rules.
This is the real story of American Gangster. (1973), Newark, New Jersey, is gripped by a major heroin epidemic. The vast housing projects are rife with drug addicts overdosing. Law enforcement is desperate to find a solution. Richie Roberts is the head of a special narcotics task force in New Jersey. He's the key prosecutor depicted in the movie American Gangster.
Newark, Camden, Trenton, wherever there was a inner city and a minority population, you could see addicts lying on the street corners, sleeping in their cars. You could find needles on the streets. You could find needles in playgrounds. It's hard for me to believe my own mind pictures because it was that bad.
Officers from Richie's New Jersey Special Narcotics Unit are responding to a report of 2 dead bodies in a Newark housing project. They first find the body of a young boy.
Kids of heroin addicts, if God forbid both the mother and the father are addicts, they're on their own from day one. Have we discovered kids ingesting heroin back in those days? Yeah. I mean, I don't think anybody purposely gave it to them, but it's laying around these houses all the time.
When they find the boy's parents, both are dead from overdoses of heroin.
You can't overstate how bad the problem was. You really can't. It was horrible. It was just horrible. Heroin, in particular, was out of control.
Behind this new epidemic is a previously unknown brand of heroin.
The glassine envelopes are marked with the brand, Blue Magic.
But nobody knows where Blue Magic is coming from or who is behind it. Across the Hudson River, Blue Magic also has New York City in its grip.
Early 1970s, it was estimated, probably a low estimation, that there were about 500,000 heroin addicts in the United States, 200,000 of them in New York alone.
Well, it was a massive problem. It was very difficult to deal with the traffickers in an effective and efficient manner because there were so many of them. So much heroin was being imported into the city. Many people got involved because the monies to be earned by this criminal element were enormous, and it was a very difficult problem.
The Federal Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, formed in 1973 to combat drug crime around the country. Their primary focus in New York City is the mafia.
When you look at the mafia, the 5 families of the mafia, the Bonanos, the Colombos, Gambinos, Genoveses, and Lucchese's, they were headquartered in New York City and with distribution tentacles and captains and bosses around the country.
Historically, the mafia controlled 80% of the heroin trade. It came into the US from Turkey via the infamous French connection. The mafia refined the heroin in Marseille, France, before shipping it to New York City. often smuggled in the hollow spaces of cars. But when the US government financed the destruction of Turkish poppy fields, they thought they had cut the heroin supply off forever. But out of nowhere, blue magic floods the market. Purer, cheaper, and more addictive.
I can't remember how many people a week or a month were dying from overdoses and other causes, but it was terrible.
New York as a whole was always the major point where the drugs would come in before they'd even be filtered off to Detroit or Chicago. But Harlem by the 1970s was really the epicenter of drug distribution, particularly heroin.
Users are all ages and from all walks of life. The effects of heroin are indiscriminate.
I had a family member, a dear cousin. He got on stuff. He said, I gotta get out. I'm gonna kill myself.
Finding the source of blue magic is the cops' urgent priority.
We were told, stop this epidemic. Our main focus was to find out where the heroin was coming from, how it got up into the Jersey area, and to stop it.
December 1973, New York. The DEA decides to start at the bottom of the chain and work up. They arrest two known distributors, Mario Perna and Tony Vazzino. The cops hope these mafia distributors will lead them to the man behind the heroin.
When Perna and Vazzino were arrested, they were in possession of an enormous quantity of heroin, which was earmarked for Frank Lucas.
Frank Lucas was already on the police radar. Could the Harlem heroin dealer be the man behind Blue Magic?
We knew about him going back to at least 1970 or thereabouts, but could not make a case on him.
A subsequent raid on Vazzino's apartment provides the cops with hard evidence linking the mafia to Frank.
He had paperwork on him, his, quote, books, which named Lucas and the wholesalers by code name and their real telephone numbers.
Under questioning, Perna and Vazzino name Frank. It's the final piece of evidence the cops need. It's obvious the authorities are dealing with a major player. But who is Frank Lucas? The story starts in Harlem 8 years earlier. Back then, Frank Lucas was a low-level drug pusher from North Carolina who had been dealing heroin in Harlem for 5 years.
Frank Lucas obviously had some street sense to come from the South and set up shop in the epicenter of narcotics dealing in New York City. He had something.
Frank was getting his heroin from the mafia. Progressing from a small-scale thief, Frank is impressed by the amount of money heroin brings in. If he can move up the food chain, he can make even more. But he needs to make a name for himself.
Frank Lucas, like any other rising drug lord, in order to become that, you have to attain some kind of reputation on the street.
Frank lends a street thug named Tango a kilo of heroin to make a deal. But when Frank wants his money, Tango doesn't pay up. Frank takes the opportunity he's been waiting for. Tango's death pushes Frank up the ladder.
Frank was quite comfortable in telling the story of how he killed someone, which will certainly give you street credibility.
It's the kind of ruthlessness that draws the attention of Harlem's big fish. And it isn't long before he gets his chance to move up the chain. Harlem, New York, 1966. Frank is hustling pool in a club on 7th Avenue. Also hustling that night is Ice Pick Red, a local thug known for being a ruthless contract killer.
Ice Pick said, I want to play you for $1,000.
It's a dangerous challenge. Frank tries to lower the risk, but Ice Pick refuses. He isn't a man to cross. Suddenly, the stakes are unexpectedly raised.
In walks Bumpy Johnson, right? Dressed to the nines, the legend.
Bumpy Johnson has made his bones with one of the most powerful families in organized crime.
Bumpy rose up through and became an associate, a friend of the Genovese crime family. So by the 1950s, early 60s, Bumpy Johnson was a legend, not just in Harlem, but in greater New York.
It was essentially a contact with the Italian mafia. And he sort of handled a lot of their affairs within the Harlem community.
Harlem's most powerful heroin dealer heard about Frank's slaying of Tango. Now he wants to test him against a real thug.
He says, can you beat him? To Frank, can you beat this guy? And Frank says, yes, I can. So he backs him, and then dramatically, Frank Lucas runs the table, right? And wins the money.
Frank proves himself to the most powerful man in Harlem. And it pays immediate dividends.
Bumpy Johnson takes him under his wing, supposedly shows him, you know, how to be a real gangster.
It's a significant step in Frank's career as a heroin dealer. And it isn't long before the heroin business undergoes a revolution. Harlem, New York, 1970. 4 years after Harlem drug dealer Frank Lucas became Bumpy Johnson's confidant, the heroin kingpin dies at the age of 62. Ex-thief turned heroin dealer, Frank Lucas is now the most powerful man in Harlem and seamlessly takes over Bumpy's position in the mafia supply chain.
Frank worked with Ralph Titino, who was a boss in the Lucchese crime family.
Since his introduction to high-ranking mafia boss Ralph Titino, Frank's profits are booming. And he demands increasing amounts of heroin.
Frank would get heroin from 3 to 50 kilos a weekly basis all the time during the late 60s and 70s.
Heroin demand is on the up and up in Harlem. 15,000 drug addicts live in the area, with addiction rates 12 times the national average. But after the DEA's destruction of the French Connection, the mafia's ready supply of heroin dries up. As supply reduces, prices rise, and Frank's profits are squeezed. Before long, Frank finds himself in serious debt to the mafia.
Every drug lord began to resent the mafia. The mafia charged quite a fee to import. They were the king of the importation of narcotics. Frank Lucas had tallied up some considerable debts to the mafia. Every drug dealer on the rise tends to tally up some debts, but Lucas's was, according to some stories, becoming dangerous levels.
The DEA were monitoring on the wire some Italian gangsters, right? Italian American gangsters. And they were talking about killing Frank because he owed over $300,000 to them.
The mafia are bad news for Frank. He is desperate to pay off his debts and find a new, reliable source to feed his customers.
I think that beginning in the early 70s, and Frank wasn't unusual in this, I think a lot of dealers were looking for new supplies of drugs.
And with the arrival of Blue Magic, it's clear that they found it. And Frank is making more money than ever. January 1973. Frank's cutting operation is in full swing. And Frank does everything he can to maximize his profits.
Frank would bring people in to cut the heroin. Very professional operation.
And Frank did everything he could to ensure that his customers wouldn't be tempted by other brands.
They wanted to corner the market. And the way they did it was to put a greater percentage of heroin in the package. In Jersey, it could be as low as 1% heroin, 3% heroin.
Frank's product is nearer to 10%.
When an addict gets a product that gives him a better and longer high, they're going to gravitate to that product.
Branding has also been key to Frank's success.
Blue Magic was Frank's brand. It was a brand name he gave his heroin. The addicts would ask for, is this Blue Magic?
Even heavily cut Blue Magic offers a greater high than the competition. And is making Frank a very wealthy man.
Lucas was bringing out at least $1 million in cash a week. $1 million a week in profit.
But Blue Magic is proving deadly.
The serious problem was, if they put 10% in, which they did originally, even 6-7% heroin, people are not used to that. And they started ODing. And that's what actually caused everybody to be excited about it, was that the drug populace were ODing on this brand new product called Blue Magic, which had a greater percentage of heroin, and people couldn't handle it, but everybody wanted it because it gave them a better high.
August 1973. It's clear that Frank's operation is bigger than the cops had thought. Blue Magic spreads beyond New York and into New Jersey. Distribution is being handled by Frank's family, including his 17-year-old nephew and his brother, Shorty Lucas. They call themselves the Country Boys. Shorty quickly develops a reputation as a brutal enforcer.
Shorty was brutal. I mean, he was as brutal or more brutal than Frank.
The new street gang's violent reputation, encouraged by Frank and Shorty, spreads fear across New Jersey.
When they had a dealer who was short packaging them or whatever reason, they would kill them. We found bodies at the base of the projects. They were thrown off the roof.
Shorty takes control of the streets by killing off rival dealers and replacing them with his own soldiers.
They had different locations all over the place where they cut the heroin and packaged them in the glassine envelopes and sold them on the streets. Noticed that the old dealers on the streets were being tossed off, and guys were coming on, and women on occasion, with Southern accents. So it wasn't too hard to figure out who they were.
Harlem, New York, 1973. Blue Magic has turned Frank's fortunes around, and he now has an estimated $50 million hidden in Cayman Island bank accounts. He likes splashing out at one of Harlem's coolest night spots, Small's Paradise.
He was notorious in terms of his expenditures, like, you know, to show people how wealthy he was. And that, of course, attracted the attention of DEA and the government.
It's the point at which Richie Roberts enters the story.
I had a friend of mine in DEA in New York, and he took me there one night. And that was the first time I saw Frank. Everybody knew him. people were coming over, shake his hands. I mean, you really want to keep a low profile. That's not the way to play. But, you know, good-looking guy, beautiful women around him, good-looking guys around him. He thought of himself as a businessman. He wanted to make money. And he thought of himself as a black man making inroads into a white business. And he was proud of that. He was very charismatic. He was illiterate. He's still illiterate. He knows how to count money very well.
But Roberts isn't fooled by Frank's charm.
Frank was not an urbane individual. Frank did not wear Armani suits. He didn't spout philosophy, killed people. He was a stone killer. Everybody was afraid of him. That's how he made his money. That's how he spread his poison about, because he was Frank Lucas. Mess with me and you're dead.
But though he likes to play the glamorous playboy, everyone knows what he is capable of.
Frank was not cultivated or cultured or extremely intelligent. He was a brute. He was a menace on the street. Very difficult person. Many people were afraid of him.
Richie Roberts has seen with his own eyes that Frank is making a lot of money, but he still has no idea where blue magic is coming from. The hunt is on. 1974, Newark, New Jersey. Heroin overdoses are rising across the city. Richie Roberts pulls together a group of investigators known as the Z-Team to step up the war against Frank Lucas.
We wanted to know where they were cutting the stuff. We wanted to know how it was coming up. We wanted to know how Frank was able to control this. We did everything possible to determine that.
Roberts sends a sample of blue magic for analysis.
Through the chemist, we discovered the difference in the quality of the heroin, that it was going way up. They also can tell you what part of the world it was coming from.
The results surprise them.
It's coming from Asia. So we had a heads up immediately as to where poppies were being grown. We didn't know how it came into our country.
The only person who knows the answer is Frank. And Roberts is determined to find out. In New York, the DEA and the NYPD are also onto Frank Lucas. But everyone is keeping their cards close to their chests.
At the time I was involved, I knew very little of what New York was doing. I knew they were investigating, but I was under instructions just to, keep whatever we're doing to ourselves. I assume they were as well. Because don't forget, there was a lot of corruption, police corruption in those days. And I know they didn't trust us, and I didn't trust them. No one was telling me what investigations they were doing or how close they were to indictments, and nor was I talking to them.
In the end, it's not Richie Roberts, but the New York authorities who get to Frank Lucas first. January the 18th, 1975. Frank Lucas is at home with his wife, Julie.
Frank Lucas, we have a warrant. Tell the registered thing in the truck.
When we executed that search warrant at Lucas's house, we were hoping to find currency, which would tie Lucas to a major heroin ring.
The raid delivers more than they could ever have hoped.
The DEA found at his house an enormous amount of cash, 20s and 10s, all street money. Lucas's wife tried to hide a couple of $100,000 by throwing it out the window in the presence of the DEA agents. That was very important proof.
In total, nearly $585,000 in cash is seized.
I remember at the trial, when we had to prove it, we had to bring in like 7 or 8 suitcases.
Frank Lucas and his wife are both charged. Julie for obstruction of justice, and Frank for conspiracy to distribute heroin. 1976. With Frank Lucas now serving a 40-year jail term, the police hope that the flow of cheap and potent blue magic will dry up. But the heroin is still on the streets. Whoever is distributing blue magic, it isn't Frank. Richie Roberts' New Jersey team are no closer to knowing where it is coming from. Then they get a tip-off.
We had information that a package was coming up from North Carolina. It was coming to one of the projects and one of the apartments in Newark. We had let packages come before because we wanted the big picture. We wanted to see if we could trace where it was coming. I thought to myself, and there was argument, let it go. Let's try to follow the people who, are selling it. I said, wow, if we let this stuff out on the street, there's gonna be a lot of dead people out on the street. And there's gonna be a lot of people exposed to it who never were exposed to it. I said, take it down. Take the package down.
Busting through the door, Richie Roberts' Z team find Frank's family street gang still alive and kicking. This takedown nets $10 million worth of heroin. And when the cops arrest the country boys, one of them is Frank's 17-year-old nephew.
That amount of drugs, back in the 70s, a New Jersey judge was going to give him life.
Facing life in jail, the kid begins to talk.
He just remembered everything, gave details, was specific, what to do with the drugs, where to take them, where to concentrate. We got the Jersey end of it from the dime bag dealer on the street to Shorty, who controlled Jersey, and above him, Frank.
The nephew's information lands Frank with another 30 years in jail. A grand total of 70 years with little hope of freedom. So Frank Lucas flips. Exposing a network of corrupt cops. And then leaving jail as a free man. This is how the movie American Gangster tells it. But the real story is very different. What the cops really want to know is where's the blue magic coming from? Who is the real man behind the tsunami of suffering that the supercharged drug has caused?
It wasn't just, Newark, New Jersey. It was New York. It was wherever they could sell it. I've heard from DEA agents during this time that they found blue magic in California.
Desperate for freedom, Frank tells them what they want to know.
Frank testified on the record that he went to Bangkok, Thailand, for the purposes of connecting with a major heroin source there and basically cut out the mafia so he could deliver direct from Thailand into the United States of America.
The more Frank talks, the more incredible the story becomes. The route the heroin takes into the US is simply astonishing. 1972. The story starts here, 3 years before Frank's arrest. At this time, he is deep in debt to the mafia and holed up in a secret hideaway. But he is unexpectedly thrown a lifeline. He meets a heroin importer who offers him the deal of his life. Frank could make a fortune and cut the mafia out.
Frank Lucas likely met him through a mutual friend or a family member. They were both from the South. Nobody on Earth seemed to know who he was and liked it that way.
The man claims to run a vast heroin smuggling operation from Southeast Asia, worth $50 million a year.
Frank, of course, was eager to get access to this supply, which eventually became Blue Magic. It gave him freedom from the Italian-American Mafia. He didn't have to work with them. It was such a high quality that he can make more money.
He agrees to supply Frank, but before he leaves, Frank has a favor to ask. He needs money to pay back the Mafia. Sensing Frank could be useful, he takes a chance.
He ended up loaning $25,000 to Frank Lucas to pay that debt off. At this point, he was like one of the major drug dealers in the world. I mean, he was making all kinds of money, so he could afford it.
Frank reveals the real mastermind behind Blue Magic. A dealer the cops already have in custody. Leslie Ike Atkinson. Within 2 years, Frank Lucas has become extremely wealthy. But he wants promotion. When Ike Atkinson's second in command is put in jail, Frank makes his move. He heads to Thailand to make an offer he thinks Ike can't refuse. Bangkok, Thailand. Frank is at Ike's center of operations, Jack's American Star Bar. Ike listens to Frank's pitch to become his business partner.
Ike was always wary of Frank. You know, he didn't fully trust him. And he told him, yes, you know, we can work out something.
But Ike doesn't want to give Frank any control within his organization. He wants him as his dealer in Harlem.
Ike says, I'm going to be the boss. I'm going to be controlling the distribution, and I'll give you the drugs. But it's not exclusively you. You know, I'll be dealing with other people.
It's a rejection Frank will never forget. And he knows he's lost out on multi-millions of dollars. Now, in the interrogation room, Ike will pay for turning his back on Frank. Frank is about to tell the cops the astonishing story behind Blue Magic and the ex-master sergeant in the US Army behind the operation, Ike Atkinson. (1968), Vietnam. The war is still raging. Retired Army Sergeant Ike Atkinson spots an opportunity with a former military colleague, Herman Jackson, to supply the US with high-grade heroin. Ike and Jackson buy cheap heroin from the poppy fields of the Golden Triangle in Laos, Burma, and Thailand. Ike smuggles the heroin into US bases in North Carolina on board military aircraft.
Atkinson tried smuggling some heroin himself aboard military aircraft back to the States, was successful in doing that.
It's so successful, he expands his operation using a network of active GIs to transport the heroin.
Slowly but surely, he built this network using soldiers that were going back to the United States on leave. And the US military were not paying attention. They were in a war.
After 4 years, the authorities start to suspect heroin is entering through US military bases. But how?
Authorities were aware of narcotics coming into the country. They knew somehow the military or military people were involved in this. But nobody knew who Ike Atkinson was for several years, just the way Ike Atkinson liked it.
With extra scrutiny of military customs, Ike's operation had to get creative.
There are these small overnight bags, the GIs called them AWOL bags, absent without leave, you know, it's just a small gym bag type thing made out of leather. They would sew in a false bottom. Under that false bottom, there'd be about 700 grams of pure heroin.
Ike develops even more ingenious smuggling methods. Film canisters, soldiers wearing leg casts, while building a network of at least 50 associates and hundreds of GIs in the process.
And just say, hey, can you take this back with you? Somebody to pick it up from you. Others, they paid. Others, they relieved debt from their gambling.
Ike continues to keep one step ahead of the authorities.
Came up with an ingenious way of shipping heroin using teak furniture.
As much as 100 kilos of heroin at a time was squeezed into hollowed-out furniture bound for the US.
He was looking for an opportunity to make a few huge shipments that would set him up for the rest of his life.
Buying a kilo of heroin for $4,000 and selling it for $100,000 nets a profit of $96,000 per kilo. Ike begins to amass a vast fortune.
They'd take the 1 pure kilogram of heroin and make 4 kilograms of 25% pure heroin and sell each one for $25,000.
And Ike has a vast network of dealers, each demanding more and more of his purer product.
He had customers throughout the East Coast of the United States, not only New York City, but Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Washington, D.C. He had customers out on the West Coast.
The DEA says that between 1968 and 1975, he made $400 million, which today's money would probably be closer to $1.2 billion.
The DEA administrator at a news conference said that it was probably the largest smuggling organization of Asian heroin in history. Atkinson, in the drug world, was the kingpin. He had the dope, and he who has the dope rules.
Trying to evade the DEA, Ike continues to use military aircraft to smuggle pure heroin through military bases for years. Frank Lucas is about to bring the whole enterprise crashing down. June 1975. Frank Lucas's information is explosive. What remains of Ike Atkinson's network is also arrested.
As far as I know, as far as I was told by the feds in New York, he gave up everybody.
He was informing on his criminal associates. I mean, people he did business with, people in his organization, people in other organizations. As a result of Frank's cooperation, I believe well over 100 people were convicted of narcotic distribution.
Lucas gave significant information. I'm not saying he gave everything he knew, but he gave, I'm going to say, maybe 60% of what he knew.
Already charged with heroin trafficking, the cops now realize the extent of Ike's organization. It is estimated that his smuggling network into the US is worth $50 million a year. And yet outside the DEA, few people even knew he existed.
The key ingredient to Ike Atkinson's success was that no one knew who he was, and the reason why they didn't know is the system. These former and current military men had access to airplanes. They weren't questioned. They could bring it right over, no questions asked.
Ike pleads guilty and is sentenced to 19 years in jail. The dogged work of Richie Roberts, his Z-team in New Jersey, and members of the DEA in New York have finally seen Frank, Ike, and their networks brought down. Frank's cooperation sees his 70-year jail sentence reduced to just 6. Frank is freed in 1981. The #1 heroin dealer in Harlem, the boss of a brutal criminal gang that controlled the streets through murder and violence, who delivers the real heroin kingpin, is a free man.
But it paid off for him because he was able to get out of jail early.
Frank Lucas was probably one of the major heroin traffickers in the New York City area. There's no question about that. But as far as taking the heroin trade from the Golden Triangle to the addicts in the street in New York City, and it's just not the case.
Frank's life may have inspired American Gangster, but Frank's real story is very different to the movie. And Frank's criminal history doesn't end there. Within only 3 years, Frank is back in jail again for dealing heroin. This time he is sentenced to 7 years, serves the full term, and is released in 1991. As for the man behind Blue Magic, after the initial sentence of 19 years in jail, Ike is given a further 13 for continuing his smuggling operation from inside prison. Ike is eventually freed in 2007, having served a total of 32 years. And when the film is released in the same year, Richie Roberts receives a surprising call from him.
He said that Frank, he was proud. I did most of that. Frank didn't do it. I controlled Asia, and I didn't get my credit. They think it's credit.
Then Ike threatens revenge on Frank.
What are you saying? He says, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to kill him. So I said to Ike, how old are you? He said, I'm 80. I said, Ike, you ain't killing anybody. Get a rocking chair. He's down in North Carolina. Sit on the porch, go by a river, watch the water go by. And he started laughing.
Ike died in 2014 at the age of 88. Frank Lucas, also 88, is still alive. With his mafia connections through Bumpy Johnson, Frank Lucas undoubtedly rose to become a large-scale heroin dealer in 1970s Harlem. But he got his heroin from Ike Atkinson. Ike was the real American gangster, who created a smuggling operation unlike any seen before. For a decade, Ike's audacious network of military servicemen, planes, and bases that brought vast quantities of heroin from Southeast Asia into the US was unstoppable, until Frank brought him down. Frank Lucas was nothing more than his man in New York.